Are we ready to go?
We are ready to go.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, November 10th meeting of the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to begin the meeting by asking you to join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, great. Good morning, CAO Nielsen. Any modifications to the agenda?
Good morning, Chair Fennell. Yes, there are several modifications to the agenda this morning.
Okay.
Supervisor Bohn is pulling items C2, C3, and C7 for discussion.
Okay.
And that concludes the modifications to the agenda.
Thank you very much, CAO Nielsen. And with that, we will go to the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar minus the items that were pulled for discussion.
Second.
Thank you, Supervisor Bass, Supervisor Wilson. With that, I will open the consent calendar and invite Supervisor Madrone, who would like to read the National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week Proclamation. Good morning, Supervisor Madrone.
Good morning, Chair. I'm actually still trying to pull up the agenda item, so maybe we'll go ahead and do the vote and I'll do it at the end. I'll have it in a minute. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no problem. We'll bring that up. So let's go to public comment on the consent calendar. And I believe we have one hand up with the last four of 3053. Press star 6. Welcome.
Good morning, Thomas Mulder. I just want to confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can, Thomas.
I was commenting on the storm damage repairs on the consent agenda. It's nice to see that Public Works is following through and getting some funding to get some of these road repairs done. It's really, really good to see improvements that were, done with storm damage, getting in different funding to get that work done. The only thing under storm damage repair, there is a really massive storm damage that was authorized. The contract was authorized for Alder Point Road just before Cal Fire, and that work has been authorized but not started. And wet weather is coming, and that hillside may slide away. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Thomas. Is there any further comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none, bring it back to the board, and maybe Supervisor Madrone has a proclamation now. Supervisor Madrone. Okay, let's go for a vote on this, and then Supervisor Madrone can do the proclamation. Ryan, let's do the roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
And Supervisor Fennell?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
And I am now ready.
Thank you very
I'm ready
much.
now.
Okay, let's go ahead and Supervisor Madrone has a proclamation to read.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Which was
and go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I was just saying it was item number 1.
Okay. Well, good morning, Madam Chair and fellow colleagues and members of the public. This is a proclamation of the Board of Supervisors, County of Humboldt. Whereas people from all walks of life, including families with children, employed and unemployed workers, elderly residents, veterans, disabled individuals, youth, and individuals are impacted by hunger and homelessness. And whereas the community recognizes that hunger and homelessness continue to be a serious problem for many individuals and families living in Humboldt County, and whereas no one should have to worry about whether they have food on their plate or a roof over their head, And whereas the aim of the National Coalition for Homelessness is and always will be to eradicate homelessness by solving the root causes of it. And whereas while homelessness creates barriers to accessing essential services such as affordable health care, housing, childcare, and education, the cost of these necessities often contribute to hunger, food insecurity, and people experiencing homelessness on any given night. And whereas the purpose of this proclamation is to educate the public about the many reasons people are hungry and homeless, including the shortage of affordable housing for extremely low and low-income residents, and to encourage support for the organizations committing to sheltering, providing supportive services, as well as meals and food supplies to the homeless and hungry. And whereas hunger is a daily experience for many people in Humboldt County, with more than 40% of low-income adults experiencing food insecurity, over 17% of seniors, and 28% of children living in poverty, which more than doubles to 57% if the household is led by a single mother. And whereas the California Center for Rural Policy reported in their Humboldt County food assessment that more than 31% of adults experience food insecurity, while 37% of households with children experience food insecurity. Most live on fixed incomes or survive paycheck to paycheck. And whereas more than 1 in 6 Americans, or 18.2%, said there have been times over the last 12 months that they did not have enough money to buy food that they or their families needed. And whereas National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week calls attention to the plight of homelessness and hunger and encourages all people in the community to work to find meaningful solutions for these problems. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that November 15th through the 22nd, 2020 shall be known, designated, and set aside as National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. Signed, Chair Estelle Fennell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Madrone, for bringing attention to that item. So that will bring us now to items, comments on items not on the agenda, and that goes out to the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on items not on the agenda? We have one hand raised, and I believe it is 3053 again. If you can press *6, you can join us with your comment on items not on the agenda. Welcome.
Good morning, Thomas Mulder again. Just confirming you can hear me?
Yes, we can, Thomas.
Hi, so these comments are probably not so friendly. The county constantly is talking about environmental protections, talking about, doing the right thing, fining people for environmental crimes, fining people for all kinds of different things. But in that same breath, they're not following their own rules. I drove out Bryceland Road, Sunday, first time in 6 months. I was appalled to see all the spoils piles along Bryceland Road from that emergency culvert repair were still there. The straw wattle around them is blown out, and it looks to be that they're dumping sediment directly into Redwood Creek, which is a salmon spawning creek, which is a tributary to the Eel River. So I'm going to ask the county that they follow their own practices. There's an argument that it's state park's problem. It's on county property, and you're dumping sediment into the Eel River. So until you can take care of that, I ask that you not fine a single construction worker, contractor, homeowner, or anyone else that may be involved in environmental crimes if you can't follow your own practices. On top of that, there's construction taking place in Bimbo. There's a large stockpile on Bimbo Properties Inc.'s property, the ones that are trying to change their zoning. I've emailed the county, and they've said that they claim that it doesn't need it right now. As far as I'm aware, wet weather periods is October 15th through April 15th, that all erosion control measures must be in place during those periods. So if the county chooses not to follow environmental rules, they need to back off on property owners, contractors, and everyone else within the county if they can't follow their own rules. And I'm surprised that Friends of the Eel River has not set a lawsuit because of the sediment into Redwood Creek. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Thomas. We have more hands raised here. If your last four digits of your number are 0150, please press *6 and you can speak on item not on the agenda. Welcome.
Good morning. This is Dottie Russell from Southern Humboldt. I wanted to address the issue of abandoned cars and abandoned trailers, and how we might move forward with getting that. Sorry if there's feedback. I have the computer on too. So I'd like to figure out how we can do something. Maybe have a storage place for 30 days. If you're going to do a 30-day kind of notification before you tow a car. But the cars that are left behind, particularly in Southern Humboldt, I'm not familiar with other areas as much, get trash put in them, tires taken off, crazy things happen to them. People, sleep in them, but that's less frequent than having them burned. And so that's one thing I wanted to address and figure out how we can set up some kind of team where a number of people can notify, maybe a governing board where these cars are, what's going on, and we could do something about it. So it's an eyesore, it's a problem, and it's a problem for our community. Another thing I wanted to mention was apparently there's some people that are informants or something. So someone has said that there's a person in our area that is informing, which is fine, whatever. I'm not even going there with that, as much as that if there is somebody that is breaking the law, but getting by with breaking the law because they're giving some information. I don't know if that's true, but whatever it is, we need to step it up as far as people breaking the law, because it's really interfering with the peace and tranquility of anybody living in this community. So I know that you can't put so many people in jail right now, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, I'm not sure, but there is a way that I know that I knew somebody that had an ankle bracelet, and an ankle bracelet would tell you where the person is and potentially who they're interacting with. So there's recently been a young man that vandalized our store. He's been in jail. He was supposed to go to rehab. He skipped it. But if he had an ankle bracelet on, then you would know where he is and what kind of people he's hanging out with. And that in itself would take care of the problem of multiple people doing the wrong thing all being together. So rather than just letting people get by with things, if at least you know where they are and what they're doing, it would really be a lot better. So then I also wanted to address the assistance that you can give landlords that are housing people that don't have the money to pay for their housing. And there's the Section 8, which is great, takes a long time to get on that. And so maybe we could have a committee where we could discuss this. We came up with Ending Homelessness in 2005. It's 2000, and I'm about in the process to of this.
Thank you, Dottie. Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you. So the next speaker is has last four of 2666. If you press *6, you can join. Welcome.
Yes, this is Winchell Dillenbeck. I'm a McKinleyville resident and an AHA board member, and I'd like to make a brief statement regarding the proclamation that was read. I wanted to thank the board of...
I was on the thing.
Yes?
Go ahead, Winchell. It really would have been more appropriate to speak then, but I'm going to let you go. Please do.
It's kind of cumbersome these days on this stuff. I'll be brief. I wanted to thank the Board of Supervisors for their recognition of National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. AHA also has gratitude for the efforts of all organizations that address the needs of food insecure households and those who are unhoused. There's never been a greater challenge for individuals and families in our community than during the ongoing pandemic. There have never been a greater economic challenge for individuals and families in our community during this pandemic. AHA applauds the federal court decision that ruled that people experiencing homelessness cannot be punished for sleeping outside in the absence of adequate alternatives. It is clear that Humboldt County will not have sufficient affordable housing in the near future. So AHA encourages the Board of Supervisors to act on the shelter crisis proclaimed almost 3 years ago. AHA also encourages the Board of Supervisors to adequately fund the Housing Trust Fund and Homeless Solutions Committee, created almost 3 years ago, on an ongoing basis. It is important for Humboldt County Board of Supervisors to encourage support and move forward with short-term solutions for the homeless crisis, especially during this pandemic, while planning and implementing long-term brick-and-mortar permanent housing. Short-term solutions include safe parking places, legal camps, and tiny house villages. Thank you for your attention to this important matter.
Thank you, Winchell.
Thank you.
Then we have one more hand up here, public number 7488. If you would press *6, you can join the meeting and give your comments. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. My name is Suzanne Nye, and I'm a resident of McKinleyville. I'm a mother and a concerned local citizen. I don't know if this item has been on the agenda, and please, by all means, let me know if there's something already in the works that I'm unaware of. But we currently have a petition circulating asking that you, the Board of Supervisors of Humboldt County, adopt a policy as soon as possible to regulate 5G technology as it arrives in our area. 5G technology is already being installed in our midst, as you must be aware. This new shortwave technology emits at least 10 times the amount of radiation that our current 3G and 4G towers do. To function fully, 5G towers will have to be installed much closer than the older technology. Old policies to regulate older cell technology will not suffice in protecting us from this new technology. We need a new policy to regulate 5G. We are already inundated with excessive amounts of radiation through cell phones, Wi-Fi, and other quote-unquote smart technology. Having 5G facilities lining our streets will make this next level of radiation completely inescapable. We deserve informed consent. There are already over 30,000 scientific studies that have been done over the last few decades demonstrating the detrimental effects of RF radio frequency radiation. Negative effects on all life. This is not new information that I'm sharing. Humans, animals, and plants are all very negatively impacted by RF radiation. Because this is not new information, hundreds of municipalities all over the world have already adopted policies to regulate or completely ban 5G from their communities, including Marin County, just a few counties south of us. The entire county of Marin has banned these 5G small, or done their very best. They have a preemptive policy in place to ban 5G small cell facilities from residential areas and from some mixed use areas as well. They have also put in place an application process which helps to regulate when, where, and how this 5G technology is installed in their communities. And I'm just wondering, why don't we have a policy such as this yet? I realize there's a lot going on, but this is a matter of protecting the land and the people and all life forms existing here. It's a health and safety issue. We can't say we've done our best to protect ourselves and our community if we have not at least adopted a policy to make an attempt to regulate big tech and big business from destroying our home. 5G technology is far more risk and danger than it is beneficial. It will serve the interest of large corporations and big tech. I do believe if we were more informed on this issue, nobody would say they will take radiation exposure for the sake of having faster streaming internet, or higher radiation exposure, excuse me. I'm going to email a copy of Marin's policy and a few other links that you can follow to access scientific studies, as well as other information about 5G regulation efforts being made throughout the world. Please take the time to check them out and get this item on the agenda. Please adopt a policy. I implore you to do your research and to do your very best. Thank you,
Suzanne. Thank you. All right. I don't believe we have any more hands up for people wishing to speak on items not on the agenda. So I'll bring it back to the board, and that brings us to items pulled from consent. Supervisor Bohn, you pulled a number of them, beginning with C2.
I pulled 3, and I didn't know proclamations and things. I didn't know we did them before. I didn't know we changed protocol, so I'm sorry I'm screwing this up. I thought we had to pull things. Number 2 is I did want to recognize one of our clerks of the board. Tracy D'Amico has got certification from the certified clerks of the board. There are only 8 right now. There are only 8 certified clerks of the board in the state of California. We have now added 1 to 9. 2 of them are from Humboldt County. And this is a rigorous training. They do a lot of it on their own time, and then they do it. You know, they also have, when they meet, she'll be presented this at the Monterey Festival. Kathy Hayes, we have 2 of them in Humboldt County. Kathy Hayes got her certification in 2016. So knowing full well that she doesn't want the recognition, I thought it was real good that the board and everybody realize how much effort they make to basically keep us running smoothly, have a constant dialogue with other clerks of the board throughout the state, how they are implementing measures, basically how they're going back to live meetings, how they're Zooming, how they're handling this new way we're doing business and the old way we did business. So I just wanted to recognize our clerk of the board, Ms. D'Amico, for being certified as a clerk of the board. So that was number 2.
Thank you.
I moved number 2 staff's recommendation.
Second.
You've got 4 seconds, Supervisor Bohn.
Yes.
I just really echo what you've got to say. I think one of the ways I would describe Tracy is she's cool, she's calm, and she's knowledgeable, and she's kind. And those are things that are extremely important for that position, as well as an incredible dedication to making sure that all of the actions that take place at the Board of Supervisors and many other departments are duly noted. And I know that we've got a great team, and Tracy is an absolutely wonderful member, and we're very, very proud of her. Supervisor Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was echoing, I think we all would, what you said and what Supervisor Bohn said, but I'd add to what you said. She also has to wrangle 5 of us, which, especially in the
Yes.
time of COVID, is not an easy thing. And she and our entire team in there, we often, I think, put things in their hands last minute. They're just so knowledgeable, and they have the ability to figure out what it is we want to do, and they make it happen. So I just, I think they're pretty amazing. I don't know. Some weeks I kind of wonder, how they don't pull their hair out, but I appreciate that they all work so hard, and really want to congratulate. I was there when Kathy got hers, I believe at the conference that year in 2016. Yeah. For Tracy also, but we'll just
through the chair, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Brooke Eberhardt and Ryan Sharp, who have supported Tracy through this time of getting this, who I think will probably follow in the same footsteps, because knowledge is power. And I think that the power they bring to our back office and supporting us, as Supervisor Bass said, is immeasurable. And we've got 4 of the best, so we're very fortunate.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Well, we have a motion. We have a thumbs up, and I'm sure there are thumbs up all around here. And again, congratulations to Tracy. And that was a lot of hard work to get to that. So, Ryan, I bet
public comment.
You would be. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Do we have public comment on this item? My goodness, we do. That's wonderful. And with your last 4 of 1811, if you press *6, you can join us and comment on this item.
Hi.
Hi.
Supervisor Fennell, Chair Fennell. This is Tracy calling. And I would just like to thank the board for acknowledging this achievement. It's an honor to be certified by the States Association. Thanks for the continued support over the years and for recognizing that training and education is important. And I'd like to thank our office staff as well, Brooke and Ryan, but mostly I'd like to thank Kathy Hayes because she is an example of leadership and integrity, and she's always been a constant source of knowledge and support for me for the past 9 years. So I just wanted to make sure that I recognized her and thank all of you for recognizing this achievement.
Thank you, Tracy. Again, you've heard us all, and I know you know that we really, really, really admire you. And thank you so much for taking this on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wilson.
Well, because I know the staff loves long supervisor meetings, I'm going to go no, I'm just going to say thank you. And we'll make sure that we offer many, many more thanks as we move through the year.
Thank you. Hang in there, Tracy. We have another person wishing to speak. That's with the last four of 9088. Please press *6 and you can join for comment on this item. Welcome.
Hi. Well, how are you doing? And I was trying to get on for public comment, so I don't know if I'm too late for that. I was actually looking at Zoom on my computer and didn't realize I had to call my phone. So I don't know if I'm still able to do non-agenda items.
On non-agenda items. Well, let's get through this item here, and then you can just hang on there, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, 9088, and I'll call you back. I'll call on you again. Alrighty. So that's all for public comment on this item. Bring it back to the board. Any further thoughts before we take a vote? Well, again, thank you very much. And thank you, Supervisor Bohn, for pulling this item for more than just reading it out for actual discussion. Ryan, we're ready for a roll call.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Fennell?
Yes.
And Supervisor Wilson?
Affirmative.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. And congratulations again, Tracy, and thank you very much. So Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to insert this public comment on non-agenda items. We are dealing with new technology and it's difficult for some. So let's just go with 9088 and press *6 and you've got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Holly Clancy. I'm a mother of 4 children and I'm a student at college where I was agriculture program. I'm also a herbalist and holistic body worker. And I just wanted to add to the other public comment about the 5G, because many of the residents of Humboldt County were concerned about the 5G enabled small cell wireless antennas being deployed in our community. Like Suzanne and I said, we currently have a petition circulating, over 300 signers and counting. And we are asking you, the Board of Supervisors of Humboldt County, to adopt a policy as soon as possible to regulate 5G technology as it arrives in our area. I've already seen towers go up. I was in communication with Arcata High, trying to see if they had something going on in their high school, as I have a son going to school there. There's actually international appeal going on from scientists and doctors calling for stronger regulation, way more research before 5G is rolled out. The signatures from doctors from leading healthcare countries such as Germany. I think the difference between the EU and us is that these countries have national healthcare, while America runs its healthcare as a business. So they're definitely on top of this 5G rollout that's happening. The FCC's public human radio frequency microwave radiation, which is wireless radiation, general public exposure limits were adopted over 24 years ago. and they're failing to consider the widely documented adverse biological effects associated with exposure to wireless radiation, and the same type of radiation emitted by 5G wireless antennas and devices, although 5G is on a higher frequency than our current wireless technology, and also the towers would be placed anywhere from 100 to 500 feet, which would impact our residential areas very highly. I'm going to email and send you a whole comment and some links that you can look at as far as health effects on 5G. I think it's vital that Humboldt County adopt a strong legislative code to protect our community from 5G antenna installations, particularly near our homes and schools, to the fullest extent possible under law. I hope you strongly consider adopting this ordinance in part or full to protect the citizens of Humboldt County from involuntary exposure to wireless radiation. It also affects our wildlife immensely, and our trees and everything else, which in our county, that's why I moved here, is for, the beautiful area that we live in. Hopefully we can keep that beautiful by, making this really a issue stand out in our community. Marion County has already restricted 5G, so has Petaluma, is in the process of doing it. Mill County, where it was invented, has also done that. So there's multiple counties in California doing exactly what we're asking you to do. So hopefully we'll be able to get it on agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, board. We'll go back now to items pulled from the consent agenda. Back to you again, Supervisor Bohn, on item C3.
Well, I would have felt remiss if we would have bypassed every year we do a proclamation for Veterans Day, which will be tomorrow. With that being said, and in deference to one of Virginia's sons and everything else, I want to wish happy birthday, 245th birthday to the Marine Corps today. So Semper Fi, stay loyal. Proclamation of the Board of Supervisors, County of Humboldt. I'm a firm believer that there should be 2 days a year, Mother's Day and Veterans Day. We probably should support 365 days a year because we wouldn't be here, but that's just me. Anyway, this is a proclamation of the Board of Supervisors, County of Humboldt, whereas the people of Humboldt County and the state of California appreciate and admire the thousands of men and women who serve and have served in the armed forces to protect and preserve their country, their freedoms enjoyed by all Americans. Whereas in war, international conflicts, peacekeeping missions, men and women have been wounded, taken prisoner, and died in the line of duty. And whereas due to their military experience, veterans possess a wide variety of valuable qualities, including experience, maturity, leadership, and loyalty. Whereas the County of Humboldt is committed to ensuring that veterans receive the respect and honor they have earned, now therefore be resolved that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors hereby honors all veterans for their extraordinary service to their country and thanks them for protecting the freedom we all enjoy. I move the proclamation.
Second. Unless, Virginia, your mic's off, so.
That's all right, you can have it.
Thank you, Supervisor Bohn and Supervisor Bass. Any comment on this item from the board? Okay, well, again, thank you very much for bringing this up and reading it out, Supervisor Bohn. Incredibly important for us to continue to honor the service of our veterans. And I was just talking with somebody from the Second World War the other day, and it was just, it's difficult sometimes because he was saying how he'll go back to Europe and immense recognition of veterans there from the Second World War is still vibrant, whereas not so much here. And so I want to recognize veterans of every single war that are still here with us. Thank you for that. So any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll come back to the board and go to Ryan for a vote. Ryan, if you can poll the board, please.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Please, yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
And Supervisor Fennell.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Ryan. That will bring us to item C7. This was also pulled by Supervisor Bohn, and it is from the County Administrative Office regarding the Headwaters Fund. Supervisor Bohn.
Yeah, and the reason I pulled this is, I mean, it's $21,000, and we're talking about an airport that's still running 70% down, and we're going to talk about leakage, which we have experienced greatly, and it's going to be a lot of phone calls. I know there's $1,500 for presentations, but I think it's all going to be done online. And I know we just throw it out there, and there's some matching funds. I appreciate everything that the Economic Development Center does, and they've been the lead on, I know, air travel a lot, and not knowing near as much as they do. I know if we have passengers, they'll bring planes here. I didn't understand the leakage. It's kind of like studying peak flows of a river in September. The traffic's low and everything else, and boy, they've brought everybody on board. I see today for this this $21,000. We probably should have just approved it. Would have been cheaper. But could I just find out how we're gonna, where this is coming, or should this be done at a later point? I have no problems with it. I just wanted it explained to me because somebody asked me.
CAO Nelson.
Chair Fennell, I think that your Director of Aviation, Cody Rogatz, is probably the subject matter expert on the leakage study. So I would recommend that we hear from Director Rogatz.
Thank you, CAO Nelson. Welcome, Director Rogatz.
Thank you, Chair Fennell, and thanks to the board for your consideration of this matter. In answering what the leakage study is, this takes a look at passengers from our region that travel at our airport, ACB, utilizing the United Airlines service, and those passengers that leave our area, traveling to and from the region, utilizing different airports in the Bay Area, Medford, or Sacramento. The last study was completed approximately 4 years ago, and completing this study now would analyze the full calendar year of 2019 and provide us the updated information. That old study is considered out of date and really carries little relevance as we continue conversations with United and other airlines trying to recruit them to start new service in our market. Providing this study at this time will give us an evaluation of the full passenger demand in our market, rather than an analysis at a later date, which would have to take into consideration the impacts of COVID-19. These statistics will help us show airlines the true demand of our market as we continue recovery. As all of you are aware, we were down approximately 95% in the month of April due to the impacts of COVID-19, and we've recovered significantly from that time. In the last couple of months, we've been approximately 60% down from the same months last year. While that's still a drastic downturn, we are doing much better than the national average, which is still, as Rex noted, in the ballpark of 70% decline from last year's overall passenger numbers. Volair Aviation has the most recent experience and most familiarity with our market in helping us with this leakage study. Their recent experience with our market and region will be beneficial to them completing the study in a timely manner, allowing us, as I mentioned, to utilize that data for conversations with airline leadership.
Thank you, Director Rogatz. Any questions or comments from the board for Director Rogatz? I also noticed that Headwaters Fund members are here to speak with us as well. If anybody like to chime in there, Kenny or Bruce or our Economic Development Director, Adair.
Well, the only comment I would make is that, if I may, is that the concerns raised by Supervisor Bohn were raised in the Headwaters Board. I think they're legitimate concerns, but basically the conclusion of the board unanimously was that this is an important tool for marketing our airport as we come out of the COVID experience. It's important to have this available so that we can convince airlines to come back or expand at the airport location. Also, Greg Foster was the primary staff person in the presentation. His success with bringing airlines and promoting the airport, his record was also a convincing factor in this. And the funds that are being utilized in this, and Kenny can correct me if I'm wrong, I think, are funds that were returned to the headwaters from the funds that were provided as a guarantee for airline service. And so this is basically a benefit. These are not extra funds that have been generated through our investments and so forth. So we felt, based on that, and of course, based on what you've already heard this morning, that this was something we could recommend, and the board approved it unanimously. Thank you.
Through the chair, unless everybody else wants to speak, it's been asked and answered for my benefits.
Good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Kenny. With that, we do have an item before us, C7, and I would
I'll
go to the public.
Staff's recommendation.
Again.
I have a motion and a second. We do have a public comment on this item. I believe there's a hand up with the number 3378. Last four digits of your phone number. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning. It's Greg Foster over at Redwood Region Economic Development Commission. And one of the things I used to tell my staff when I had salespeople is stop selling when you've already made the sale. So I'm not going to say anything more other than thank you for your support.
Thank you, Greg. We'll bring it back to the board and to Ryan for a roll call.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
And Supervisor Fennell?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody for coming here to explain that. The next item on the agenda is departmental reports, and this comes to us from the County Administrative Office, and it's regarding our calendar for the year 2021, most specifically meetings that are canceled. So welcome, CAO Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Before your board today is the meeting schedule for calendar year 2021. Also contained in the agenda item is a list of recommended meeting cancellations due to county holidays, a fifth Tuesday, and conferences. And your board is able to modify this meeting schedule as your board sees fit. And with that, that concludes the staff report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, CAO Nielsen. Supervisor Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you, CAO Nielsen, for bringing this forward. It's really hard to try to plan for next year when we talk conferences because we don't know what that's even going to look like. But there's a belief that things might be, kind of changing back around. Let's hope. So I'm curious. There's also some conferences that we did not list in there. We don't always. It's like the NACO Legislative Conference or CSAC Ledge Conference. So when I guess the expectation is if people are missing, then they're missing. We don't. I mean, I wouldn't exactly say we need to have the time, our meeting canceled now, since we don't know what's really going to be happening. But hopefully there's some latitude as we move forward if we find out that there's some other events we may have needed to consider. That's all. I don't have a disagreement with what we've got in front of us. Just wanted to mention a concern.
Thank you, Supervisor Bass. And
I make a motion for staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I just wanted to note that when I first looked at it, I went, oh, wait a minute, there's only one fifth Tuesday, but I in reading the report. I appreciate you balancing out the fact that we will actually meet on some fifth Tuesdays just to balance out the other cancellations. So appreciate that, CEO Nielsen. We have a motion and a second, and we have public comment on this item. Welcome, 3053. If you can press *6, welcome.
Morning, Thomas Boulder. About your calendar there, I would love to see a meeting place on your calendar proposal. We are in the lowest tier, and as a commenter earlier was unable to attend via Zoom and had to call in, and thank you for letting them speak, but it would be great to start meeting in person again, take safety measures into effect. And I see lots of people that are out and about within the public. So the ones that you want to shelter in place, I respect their choices, but for those of us that are out and about and out there at social gatherings and public gatherings, I think the time is now to meet in person. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Thomas. And I think that is all for public comment on this item. I'll bring it back to the board. I will just say that we are actually in the process of preparing to go back into holding our meetings, but given the fact that we're still dealing with COVID and will be for quite some time, there are extra measures that has to be taken to make it a hybrid type of meeting. So it will take a little while yet before we can do that, but understand people would like us to meet as we have in the past, but we're still not through the pandemic and the situations that we're dealing with as we go into the winter. Any further public comment or any further comment from the board on the calendar? Everybody okay with that? Duly noted, Supervisor Bass's references to conferences and where and when we're going to be. But with that, Ryan, I'll take it to a vote of the board on our calendar for 2021.
Thank you, Supervisor Fennell. Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Fennell?
Yes.
And Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda comes to us from the Treasurer Tax Collector. Welcome, Mr. Bartholomew.
Thank you, Chair Fennell, fellow supervisors and staff. John Bartholomew, Treasurer Tax Collector. And the ordinance update before you today is for the business licenses. And County Council Billingsley, did you need to say anything relative to the waiving of the reading or anything in this case before I go on?
My plan was just to introduce the ordinance, which I can do right now.
Please do. Thank you.
Before your board is introduction of an ordinance amending Chapter 1, Division 1, Title 8, Business Licenses, Franchises, and Municipal Solar Utility Programs of the Humboldt County Code.
Thank you, Council Billingsley. And I did not have much in particulars to bring to your board this morning, other than to say that the business license ordinance has been out of reality as far as how the practices and procedures and regulations have been for some time. And we actually started updating this back in 2017 after the cannabis licensing was being developed full force. And today that's a significant addition to the business license ordinance in that section 811-11 is strictly about the cannabis licensing types. And so I don't have anything to mention in particular about this, other than to say that I'm sorry it took me and this office so long to get this updated, but you can only do what you can do. And but now I'm very glad that it's in front of your board for approval. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Any questions or comments from the board for Treasurer Tax Collector Bartholomew? No questions. Any public comment on this item? Okay, I believe we do have one public comment. 3053, if you would press *6, please. Welcome.
Welcome. Hello, Thomas Mulder again. I was just commenting. I support this ordinance amendment, and I would like to thank the Treasurer Tax Collector for doing this extra workload without demanding extra staff or extra money. I know they've dealt with the cannabis aspect without taking on a bunch of extra staff or demanding at a public meeting for extra staff or money. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And I believe we do not have anybody else on here for the public. Ryan, correct? Let's come back to the board. And again, I want to thank you very much for your work on this. And I think we can go to a vote on that if we have a motion.
I'll make the motion to move for, I'll move staff recommendation on this item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And I think go to the roll call. Ryan, please.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Supervisor Bohn?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
And Supervisor Fennell?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
Thank you, and thank you again, John. For your
Thank
work.
you very much, board. Have a great day.
You too. So the next item before us is a public hearing, and this comes to us from the Planning and Building Department. It's an appeal of a conditional use permit approved by the Planning Commission on September 19th. I'm now opening the public hearing on the appeal and ready to receive the staff report and then testimony from the appellant and the applicant. So welcome, Director Ford.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. John Ford with the Planning and Building Department. Good morning to you and the members of the board. Steve Lazar and I will be presenting this, and rather than taking a lot of time, I'm just going to ask Mr. Lazar to go ahead and walk you through the components of the project, walk you through the components of the initial study negative declaration that was done, and also the appeal.
Thank you, Director Ford. Welcome, Steve. Planner Lazar.
Good morning, board. Everybody can hear me all right?
Yes, we can. You're a little on the distant side, but we can hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna run through a presentation. So just a moment here.
Excellent.
Okay, as Chair Fennell mentioned, this is an appeal of a Planning Commission approval of a use permit. The appellant is a group called the Friends of Ferndale for a Livable Community. The applicant for the project is the Humboldt County Fair Association. The Humboldt County Fair Association is seeking approval of a use permit to allow for concerts and motorcycle racing events to occur from the Humboldt County Fairgrounds. The use permit at this time now is to allow for the events to occur at the racetrack and grandstands. They would be outdoor events, and there would be a total of 5 concerts annually, 2 motorcycle racing events, and no other types of motorsports events. Each event would happen over a single day, meaning all told, 7 days worth of activity would be allowed under this permit request, if approved. Events would occur outside of the window where the fair, the Humboldt County Fair occurs annually, which is usually a 6-week window where there's preparation and the aftermath following the fair. We are processing a conditional use permit. It's worth noting that that was something that we chose to do as a way to provide a better forum for public participation in the public process and hearings. As the fairgrounds are a facility that are owned by the County of Humboldt and leased to the Fair Association, the use permit requirement is not a requirement that applies because jurisdictions enjoy immunity between each other. So cities and counties don't have to seek permits for approval when they own their own property. So for instance, the courthouse, to put something on top of it, you don't need to get a building permit through the city of Eureka. We have performed a review. This is a project pursuant to CEQA, and the project in this case would be the amendment to the terms of the lease agreement between the Humboldt, County of Humboldt and the Fair Association, and amending it to allow for these additional events that I just described. The project was presented to the Planning Commission at hearings in September. It was ultimately approved by the Planning Commission on September 17th, and an appeal was filed in late September by the Friends of Ferndale. As I was mentioning, this is the county fairgrounds property is located within the city limits of the city of Ferndale. I'll zoom in here. You can see that with the exception of these fields that are used occasionally for parking, the vast majority of the complex, which is outlined in red, is located within the city limits. And then in this map, what we're showing is the zoning that applies to the land that is the city, the county fairgrounds, is zoning applied by the city of Ferndale as part of their general plan and zoning. And you can see here, this is a zoning map from the city of Ferndale, and you can see the light blue color that encapsulates the majority of the fairgrounds, as well as the neighboring high school property, and it's a public facilities zone. And public facility under the city of Ferndale zoning regulations includes uses such as public fairgrounds and auditoriums. As I was mentioning earlier, the events will occur from the fairgrounds, but they'll occur from the grandstands and the racetrack. That's the concerts in the past, and both during the fair and outside of fair have occurred at this location in front of the grandstands, with the stage facing the grandstands. Important in looking at the project from the CEQA standpoint is the lead agency has a responsibility to establish and recognize what the environmental baseline is when evaluating potential impacts from a project. And in the context of something like the fairgrounds, where there's a lot of different uses, a lot of history, a lot of impacts that have been born over 100+ years, it's important that we not neglect to recognize that when considering the proposal at hand. And in this case, you can see here that the fairgrounds has changed a lot over the years, but it goes back to as early as 1870 as a location where fairs were held, not necessarily the fair we know now, but kind of more localized fairs. In 1896, the main county fair was first held at this location. It had been held in Hydesville and in Eureka and other locations over years prior to that. But since 1922, it's been held exclusively at the fairgrounds in Ferndale every year, with the exception of years during the war and obviously this year where there were a suspension of public events of that sort. The fairgrounds enjoys a lot of different uses in the context of both the fair and outside of the fair, and it's important to recognize those as well. You can see in this chart here, these are all concerts that have occurred at the facility over the last 20 so years, and you can see that they've occurred at different times and different types of artists. This is a picture from a newspaper article from 1954 showing advertising a dirt track auto racing that would occur on the fairgrounds racetrack. And then in this paper from 1925, you can see that there was a circus and horse races and band music. So, you know, it's murky as far as distinguishing the project at hand from what has already occurred at the fairgrounds over the years. And that's why it's important to keep note of that. Lastly, in thinking about how the fairgrounds are used, most of us experience it during the annual county fair, and may not realize the abundance of other things that occur throughout the year. And the Fair Association was helpful in providing more context. And this is just a small selection of a much larger list that they gave us of activities that occur at the fairgrounds outside of the fair. And you can see that includes things like the 4th of July fireworks, carnivals, graduation ceremonies. They lease out different parts of the fairgrounds for different uses. And it's important to note that it's essential to helping cover the expense of operating the fairgrounds and having it ready for the annual county fair. There's a lot of expenses that occur year-round that require that they open themselves up to other uses to help with the bottom line. There is a mitigated negative declaration that's been prepared for the project. We viewed the impacts as less than significant because of mitigation that's been incorporated. And the largest impacts that we evaluated and treated under the document were associated with noise that would result during concerts and motorcycle races. As I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but the project description that was earlier in the presentation mentioned that there would be 5 concerts and 2 motorcycle racing events. Originally, the Fair Association was seeking approval for 10 concerts and 4 motorsports events, even a larger number, but including other types of things like monster trucks, tractor pulls. That was removed from the project in the lead up to the Planning Commission hearing as a way to try to address some of the concerns that have been raised in the public comments that were received in advance of the Planning Commission hearing. And that is the project that was approved by the Planning Commission. And it was a approval of 5 concerts, 2 motorcycle racing events, no other activities. There's been some suggestion that removing those project elements, scaling back the project, requires that the original mitigated negative declaration that was prepared be recirculated. However, nothing about those changes creates new impacts, requires a different analysis, or changes the conclusions that were reached. And for that reason, we have not recirculated the document, nor do we believe that it's necessary. So as I mentioned, the noise is the big ticket item when it comes to the events and the potential impacts. And when analyzing those impacts, we use the Humboldt County General Plan as the guiding document for establishing thresholds of significance and looking at the project as it relates to those performance standards. The general plan, it's important to note, identifies the fairgrounds as a prominent stationary noise source. Other stationary noise sources in the Eel River Valley include the gravel mining operations along the Eel River. And for that reason, it's part of that baseline, that the noise that comes from fairgrounds during the fair and during other uses is an identified impact in our general plan. In the noise analysis that's been performed, it was important to look at the general plan noise standards and differentiate between different ones that apply to different situations. And we have standards that apply to continuous noise sources, and those have a different method and have different values. And we also have standards that apply to short-term noises. And we believe that this is the appropriate way to look at this, given the nature of the project. These are, these are periodic, non-continuous uses, 7 days out of the year, and the noise would be confined to those days and times. So, given that, you can see here the short-term noise standards included in the general plan establish a 65 decibel maximum for the hours of 6 to 10 p.m. And these events that are proposed would all be over by 10 p.m. So that would be ostensibly the noise standard. However, the general plan includes exceptions for different circumstances. And one of those circumstances is for temporary events in conformance with a use permit. And the idea being that use permits can allow activities that are beyond the established performance standards, and it's acceptable to allow that. But the use permit process is the place where mitigation is brokered and agreed to by the applicant and the decision maker, and that is what governs the approval and can help to address impacts. It's not a absolute threshold that can't be exceeded. So in thinking about noise, it's important to differentiate between the two different noise scenarios. One's related to concerts, one's related to motorcycle racing, and they were independently analyzed in the noise study. In the noise study that was prepared by the local consulting firm Whitchurch Engineering, and there's a representative from Whitchurch here today if you have questions, they established the community noise equivalent level, or CNEL, and they used noise sampling locations in the vicinity, including the parking lot here next to Ferndale High and a vacant lot on Arlington Avenue south of the fairgrounds. And at those locations, they took samples for current ambient noise conditions and peaks during the course of normal days, and then they calculated what the noise levels would be for different event types, including the concerts and the racetrack. So here you can see the results of the noise study that was conducted in June of 2018, and you can see that there were peaks of 76 decibels. The lowest time for noise during that period of 2 to 4 p.m. was 38 decibels, and on average a decibel range of 46 decibels. And when they did ambient noise testing from 8 to 10 a.m., the peak was even higher, strangely, and the minimums and averages were similar. Those were the things that they used when considering the noise from the project. They compared it against these ambient measurements. So in the noise study for motorcycle racing, the methodology essentially was they took 3 guys on motorcycles, had them race around the track, took measurements at the locations I just mentioned, and then used that with a equation to get to a noise level that would be for a larger number of riders, 18 riders, and they were able to extrapolate what the peak levels would be. During racing, it's not a continuous noise. There's revving of engines, there's acceleration, deceleration, but they assumed that the acceleration noise would be sustained just for purposes of being conservative on their analysis. And they also looked at the window of time when the racing would occur as from 2 to 10 p.m. because there's weighting in our noise element for noise occurring at different times of the day. When they analyzed the noise, they looked into mitigation measures that could be implemented to help with reduce the overall noise from events that are motorcycle racing. They included changes to the exhaust system to attenuate sound, reducing the number of participating racers, or ending the events earlier. And in terms of feasibility, we felt like the exhaust system treatments were the most appropriate and implementable. And there were differences between a full system treatment and just a repacking of the exhaust can. And we went with the more rigorous one, whereby the entire exhaust system would have to be a special one that minimizes sound. For concerts, the way that they approached estimating the noise from concert events, they looked at similar studies that were performed in context similar to the fairgrounds, and looked at the noise values that came from that. They confined their analysis to a 6 to 10 p.m. window, and they looked into the fact that with the fairgrounds, you would have a rebounding and doubling effect of sound as it comes off of the grandstands and comes back. And then they looked at ways of trying to minimize the noise from the events. So that included cutting off the events at an earlier time because of the weighting I mentioned, that reduces the total noise levels of the project, and also the introduction of a sound wall. The sound wall was ultimately chosen as the mitigation method. And then you can see here, this was a table showing what the attenuation from the sound wall was based on different locations. And the most ideal location was immediately behind the stage. So 21 decibels of attenuation are achieved by the introduction of a sound wall. The sound wall is composed of hay bales. So for concerts, the noise mitigation measures, construction of a sound wall, and also using a sound engineer at all times, that allows for someone who's experienced with the venue and the noise concerns to make sure that levels aren't widely variable between events, and that way the mixing board ostensibly is where that would occur. With motorcycle racing, the mitigation measures, as I mentioned earlier, was to use the specialized exhaust system and to make sure that engine noise for each participating rider did not exceed 90 decibels. And from the noise measurements and attenuation information provided by Whitchurch, we believe that's achievable. And then lastly, the testing of the motorcycle is a component of enforcing. The last part of the mitigation related to noise is this introduction or application of a community noise equivalent level. This is a value based on a composite of readings over the course of the day related to the event. There'll be times that'll be really noisy, there'll be times where it's relatively quiet, but collectively those values add up to the CNEL, the community noise equivalent level. And these are the ceilings that the Fair Association will have to stay below in the course of each event operation to comply with the terms of the permit. and they're based on the calculations provided in the noise study. So for motorcycle racing, 63 decibels is the ceiling that is being established under the terms of the permit. And from concerts, which are a bit noisier, 73 decibels. And this is to be monitored during each event, reported to the county to make sure that compliance is being achieved. And if there's issues with that, there needs to be modification to the event operation to achieve those ceilings. Other mitigation measures, non-noise related, is just the monitoring and recording of noise levels during events, the use of dust suppressants like water on the track to ensure that there's not fugitive dust issues during racing events, and the submittal of an annual report. And the point of the report is to, as I was mentioning a moment ago, provide information to the county on how they stacked up against what they had committed to in terms of the achieving certain, staying below certain thresholds. To that end, we have done some tweaking to the mitigation measures included in the mitigated negative declaration and adjusted the conditions of approval to the project to address some issues that were raised. In particular, with respect to the lighting of events, there was issues brought up by the appellant and others saying that we wouldn't find out about lighting issues until after an event had already occurred, and by that point the damage has been done. So to tighten that up, we've required that they submit a lighting plan ahead of all events, and that has to be approved by the department ahead of an event occurring, and then taking increments during each event to make sure that they can comply with those terms. Other small cleanup measures, but really nothing else that's worth noting. In terms of the appeal that we have before us today, the appellant chose to focus on the adequacy of the mitigated negative declaration. Most of the arguments made were on various impact categories, and a lengthy amount of critical comments were provided. And we don't want to belabor each of these points by going through them, but we did do that in the resolution and findings that have been provided as attachments to the board report. We took great care to go through each of the points that were made by the appellant and provide rebuttals and clarify where we disagree on the conclusions reached and why. So we're prepared to discuss any number of these challenges that have been made to the mitigated negative declaration on these categories, including air quality, noise, traffic, greenhouse gas emissions, public services. We have information provided in the findings that we can explain to you, but we'll leave that up to you how much you want to get into it. Lastly, prior to today's meeting, in the lead up to it, there had been negotiations and discussions between the appellant and the applicant. There were meetings held by representatives, and including a meeting held on October 29th at the planning department. The meeting that we attended was very cordial. There was good discussion about the concerns of the appellant, the position of the applicant. There seemed to be an openness to further discussions, and to that end, there was a discussion of possibly requesting a continuance today so that dialogue, that discussion could continue and potentially maybe materialize in a compromise of sorts. In the wake of the meeting, the Humboldt County Fair Association met as the full board, authorized the support of a continuance, and the appellant at their board meeting was unable to reach consensus on allowing for that. And so that's why we are continuing the trajectory that we have, and that's why the staff report is to provide for a decision today. The recommendation that we are making is for approval of the project. That was a recommendation to the Planning Commission. The reasons for it being that it's an appropriate candidate for use of this noise exception for events. It's a very small number of events we're talking about. 7 out of an entire year, 7 days would be days where events could occur under the terms of the permit. This is a site, as mentioned earlier, that has an established track record for holding events of this sort and magnitude. We have mitigation measures that have been included and applied that significantly reduce noise levels from the potential noise sources in the project events. And there's provisions to allow for verification, which is always essential when coming to the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan. And those provisions include this annual report, submittal of information to the Planning and Building Department for review and oversight. And that will help ensure that even if things don't go exactly as predicted in terms of the mitigation and the logistics of how to deal with things, they can be adapted. There's ways to achieve compliance with the permit terms. Alternatives to this could include, if you have a need for additional information or analysis that you're not provided today, you could request that we or the applicant provide that information and continue the hearing, or you could approve the appeal and deny the use permit. We don't believe that's appropriate for the reasons that I've stated. So with that, I'm gonna be available for questions, but we certainly have more information that we can provide if needed.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that, and bring it back to the board. And Director Ford, if you will, can you let me know who would be representing the appellants, because we'll go first hearing from them, unless there's anything you want to add.
No, there's nothing I want to add here. I do believe that the president of the Fair Board is here. It's Andrew Titus.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to start with the applicant then? Okay. Mr. Titus. I don't, yes, Humco Fair. Are you there, Andy?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Well, I would just like to say that I really feel like we have done our due diligence on this one. I mean, we have open meetings. No one stepped forward and has come to any of our meetings to address any of these topics. We reached out and tried to have constructive conversations, which were going fairly well with members of Friends of Ferndale before certain people, using their own words, beat them up and kind of made them step back, which is unfortunate when we're trying to do something that is better for everyone in Humboldt County here. I mean, this is good, clean family fun. It will bring additional revenue to businesses that I believe could really use it. I mean, outside the $8+ million that are brought in during the 2 weeks of fair, these other events would have people coming from out of town that are going to shop in our shops, get fuel in our fuel stations, eat in our restaurants, stay in our hotels, all things that I feel like are good for the community of Humboldt. Besides for entertainment that is diversified and outside the 10-day fair. And I think that the other thing that's important to take into consideration is this fair, for some people that can't afford to go to Disneyland, this is their opportunity to go to a smaller version of Disneyland in those 10 days. And I think it's funny, and I think that we need to note, people like to say, well, we support the fair, but we don't support these events. Well, those contradict each other, because very few fairs out there can support themselves off of just their fair. They're using alternative events to generate revenue to pay the bills for 365 days. And I will tell you that the fair at Humboldt County can't generate enough revenue in 10 days to foot the bill for 365. It's not possible anymore with the economics that are out there. So if people want a fair to be here in Humboldt County, which I do believe the majority of people in the county do, we need to be able to do other events. So it would be great if you guys would approve the permit so that we could move on. And again, I would like to say, we did communicate. We have been above board. We have tried to talk to the people that don't agree with what's going on. And, you know, they pulled the plug at the last minute, and here we are. But I think it's also important to note that no one complains about Bargain Lovers Weekend. No one complains about the Tour of the Unknown Coast. No one complains about the kinetic sculpture race. These are all events that happen in Ferndale that don't seem to be an issue. So, I mean, I think you guys need to realize that there are personal feelings, that there are people that want to see the association go away. And I can't help that. All we can try to do is the best job that we can do. And that's what we're here doing. So I appreciate your time and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Andy. Let's see, Supervisor Wilson, you had your hand up. Did you have a question for Mr. Titus?
No, I
or
just had a question for staff on
forward in here?
some stuff, but I can wait till all, the comments are done too.
Great, thank you. Anybody else speaking on behalf of the applicant? Okay, we'll go to the appellant, Director Ford, who's speaking on behalf of...
That would be Stephen Avis.
Okay, great. I see Stephen's picture there. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Director Ford, for the introduction, and to the Board of Supervisors for hearing this appeal. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. What we are appealing is not the nature of the project per se, but more the process that the county went through to get to the approval of a mitigated negative declaration. There are 5 points that we've made. One is that under California environmental law, an environmental impact report is required because there's a fair argument that the project will have significant impacts on the environment in several areas. And Director Ford can discuss, or speak with our, what a fair argument is. Specifically, we're concerned that the use of the exception is not appropriate in this case. An exception to a noise level typically means that if somebody complains about loud noise and the noise is occurring as part of the use permit, the noise ordinance itself won't be enforced. People will say it's just a temporary use, it's a chainsaw, somebody's cutting firewood in their yard or something like that. If there's jackhammering on a sidewalk to repair something that's for a use permit project, then that gets overlooked as well. This is different. For purposes of CEQA, the impact is still there. You can't wish away loud noise. If you are anywhere near Redwood Acres when the races are going on, you're aware of that there's just loud noise. The question is, what are the impacts and how could those be mitigated? Whether or not you are going to allow those noises to exist is a separate matter, but should not be incorporated in a mitigated negative declaration. CEQA is quite clear on when an MND can be used and when an environmental impact report is required, particularly if it's a focused EIR. The initial study's analysis of several impact areas is not supported by substantial evidence on the record, and that's in violation of CEQA. We had, a test run of 3 motorcycles, but an extrapolation that may or may not be really accurate. The study that was done was not vetted by the county. They did not have anybody actually review the findings to verify accuracy, as is typically done for projects where you don't have expertise on hand to take care of that. The proposed mitigation measures do not sufficiently mitigate expected environmental impacts caused by the report, and that's also in violation of CEQA. We have listed mufflers as a mitigation measure, but that's it for the motorcycle races. If you look at most racetracks, you would have other sources of mitigation. They're not really, they were discussed briefly in the reports, but not really considered. There's no testing of this at this point. We don't really know how effective those are. We can guess, but if you have an approved project and races and you discover that they're not working, where do you go? There was a mention that if exceedances are made by a race event, then there would have to be ways to bring it back under the allowable levels, but why aren't those being considered early on? What more could you think of to do at that point? And the findings in the CUP were not supported by substantial evidence of the record. That's more or less the same thing. I'm focusing on the environmental aspects of the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. What's really the common thread here is we don't really have sufficient information. Trying to get a decent baseline study to establish things effectively was not really done professionally in terms of having multiple soundings from different parts of town. During the event, there were echo effects from the Wildcat and the grandstand that were not really considered as the motorcycles were racing around. And some other issues that were related to that. So we really don't have enough accurate information. We can suppose things, we can project things, we can guess things, but we really don't have a really good handle on exactly what happens in this location under these circumstances. We did have 2 events that occurred in 2017, and I can tell you that they certainly were loud. Monster trucks for a couple of days and motorcycle races for a day. And there were you could definitely hear it all over town. But no measurements were being made at the time. We don't really know how that was, but it was certainly disruptive, which is another aspect of the whole program. So what's missing is enough information. And the noise study that was done was found deficient by a third-party reviewer that we had take a look at it, and that data was provided to you. I think that more data is needed in order to assess potential impacts. And one way that the board can do that would be to continue the matter and ask staff to authorize the Fair Association to actually hold a trial run, hold a race event, and see what happens. Actually get measurements made at the time. This was a conversation that we began. There was one person who was vehemently opposed to work in this direction. That person has resigned from the organization. And so the rest of us feel that this is an approach that can be made that would be helpful. A independent third-party engineering firm that specializes in acoustics would be able to help set up an accurate recording process, be able to address issues from a multitude of different vantage points, prepare a study as to what went on, and the results afterwards could be analyzed to see what worked, what didn't work, what could be improved, and so forth, if anything. And that could be incorporated into see how it goes, find out if the hay bales work, how effective are they? Is it sufficient? Does it really help get things going to the level that people would like to see? This is for the protection of the residents who live immediately adjacent to the fairgrounds. I lived in Calistoga where the county fair for Napa is held, and there are race events there. And it is it's disruptive. For sure. And I think that they have probably more sophisticated ways to mitigate things than we might have proposed at this time. We should at least give it a fair shot. So I think that trying to work out an arrangement where we can find appropriate mitigation with folks is an approach that makes sense. This is an emotional vote as well as a strategic vote for following the law. And therefore, we're trying to work to find a situation that works for as many people as possible. But it is clear that an EIR is required at some point, and we think that having more information makes that a more likely prospect that we can get an accurate projection, which would make an EIR more effective in providing information to the decision makers, which is the purpose of CEQA. I think I will hold at this point unless somebody has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Avis. Any other speakers on behalf of the appellants? Okay, I think, and I will defer to your judgment, Director Ford, but there definitely seem to be some questions here that Mr. Nuttall could answer, Nicholas, but maybe we'll go first to public comment. Director Ford, your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Yes, I would appreciate going to public comment. Then we can answer all the issues that have been raised after public comment.
Sounds good. Thank you. That had that thought as well. Thank you very much. So with that, I will now go to public comment on this item. And for those who haven't attended our meetings very often, you can press *9 to be put in the queue to speak. Once you press *9, pardon? Okay, press *9 to be put in the queue to speak. And then once your number is called, your 4-digit number, I'll ask you to press *6 so that you can speak to us. Right now we have a couple, but again, I will reiterate that if you wish to speak, I do see quite a number of people lined up here. Press *9 to be put in the queue, and then we will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number, which point you can press *6 to speak. So we'll begin here with the person with the last 4 digits of 8109. Could you please press *6? And you'll be welcomed into the meeting. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome. Speaker. Now you made the comment. Can you hear it? We hear you, and then immediately you began to drop out and be broken up. Can you get to a more solid location? Can you move around? Let's see if we can hear you again.
How's this?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Johanna Radoni. I'm a member of the Humboldt County Fair Association. And yes, as Mr. Avis said, this is an emotional issue, but it's also a very practical issue for the Fair Association. As you all know, the Humboldt County Fairgrounds is one of Humboldt County's jewels. Besides being home to the annual fair, it's also a venue for multiple events throughout the year, exhibitions, and celebrations for people of all ages and interests. I don't really think our association is trying to do anything out of our wheelhouse by applying for this conditional use permit to allow the association to offer a maximum of 5 concerts and 2 motorsports events annually. And if we were to have to file a full EIR to, as Mr. Avis suggested, I think the minimum cost of that would be $100,000 at least, and that's just not obtainable for our association. We're very sensitive to the community's concerns, and that's why we reduced our original request by half. We're just trying to stay economically viable so the Humboldt County Fair continue in the future. And I want to stress that very important that if we are not able to reduce or to produce revenue in the off-fair time of the year, it's really very possible that the Humboldt County Fair will no longer be able to operate. We're made up of a very dedicated group of volunteers, and we are always looking for additional sources of revenue. And we're totally responsible for all the maintenance and ADA upgrades to the fairgrounds. And that costs a lot of money. It costs us $25,000 per month just to keep our doors open. And that's just, paying for the utilities, the small staff that we have. And as you know, we had to cancel the fair this year. So that didn't help matters any. The fair's been taking place for 100 years, and we're economically responsible for $8 million of positive county impact. We're very proud of that, and we take that we don't take that lightly. We work hard to give back to the community. And
thank you, Mrs. Madrone. Thanks a lot, Mrs. Madrone. Okay, we'll go to the next caller, and that will be with the last four digits of 7011. 7011. And please press *6 to join. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning, board. Jay Russ calling in. I wanted to read a statement that I put together. I own a residence at 1078 Rose Avenue in Ferndale, and I want to urge you to support this conditional use permit applied for Humboldt County Fair Association. In my opinion, the mitigations are more than sufficient to lessen the impact of these proposed events. These proposed events are common events for a fair and should be covered by the existing use permit. However, the Humboldt County Fair Board has gone extra mile to hire Whitchurch Engineering to evaluate the sound impact and develop solid and common mitigations. At the September 3rd Planning Commission hearing, Commissioner McCavor summed this issue up really succinctly when that vote was unanimous. To paraphrase her statement, she said that as a member of a community, we are not always going to be 100% comfortable. Being a part of a community means tolerating difference. Others in the community will have different interests, and when those different interests are exercised are the times when tolerance is necessary. The remaining 99% of the time is when shared values create the comfort of being part of that community. I thought that was just the perfect way to sum up the situation. So as far as the Friends of Ferndale, I wonder, who elected them to dictate the values of Ferndale? Ferndale has a history of being a vibrant community with members of all ages, not simply a retirement community. This recent gentrification of Ferndale by retirees does not serve the broad needs of Ferndale families who have school-age children and those who want a resilient business district. The Humboldt County Fairgrounds has a history almost as long as Ferndale as an attraction to Ferndale. Why does it have this recent proposed 63 decibel sound cap? It didn't have that in the past. Most of the Friends of Ferndale don't even know that during the fair in the not too distant past, a man named Chopper Westbrook provided helicopter rides every hour from the 5th Street parking lot. The past lumberjack competition had unmuffled chainsaws, racing to buck logs, and open-wheeled Indy-type cars use the racetrack. Why are we so intolerant now? All of the fairgrounds I can think of in the state hold some form of a motorized event. There is a segment of the population that enjoys these competitions, and they help generate revenue for the facility and the businesses surrounding that community. I personally have traveled. Okay.
Sorry,
Thank
3
you for your
minutes
time.
each. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you. Bye. Again, just a reminder, it's 3 minutes. The next speaker, and again, another reminder, if you do wish to speak, press *9, and then when I call on you, you can press *6. So the next speaker has the last 4 digits of 1385. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Joe Capini. I live on Good morning. I live on Humboldt Hill. I grew up in Ferndale and adjacent to the fairgrounds, and I currently own property adjacent to the fairgrounds on Van Ness Avenue. I feel Ferndale is very fortunate to have the fairgrounds available. It provides a source of community, pride, family. The few times that there is noise over there, like my mom always said, she senses that it's a sense of joy, not a noise or bothersome. It's always great to hear action going, whether it was a rodeo, the fair, all the things that go on. It provides a great source of community for Ferndale. And the fairgrounds is a very valuable resource, and it's underutilized. It used to be utilized more, but now it's gotten less, and it's a huge place. We're lucky to have it. And as was mentioned earlier, in order for us to keep it, there's got to be things that are done. So things are going to need to change. So we need, in my opinion, we need to make it easier for the fair to exist, not more difficult. We need to help them use it, help them, so that they can succeed. To put up a barrier just for 7 days, to me is, I don't understand how we can do that. So I just want you to know I support the use of the fairgrounds for the 5 concerts and the 2 motorcycle events. I think they're great for Ferndale. I think they bring great value to Ferndale, and I support the Humboldt County Fair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. The next caller is with the last 4 digits of 3053. Welcome.
Good morning again. Thomas Mulder, just clarifying you can hear me.
Yes, we can, Thomas.
Hi, I'm calling in support of this application, not in support of the appellant. I think it's imperative that we have as many events as possible to bring outside people into our county to make our economy more thriving and robust. I would actually encourage you to put in a new condition of approval and allow up to 8 motorcycle races a year, so that way they could actually hold a series. And also I would recommend that you have the same sound decibel limit of, I think it's 73 decibels for the concert, whereas you're like at 63 for the motorcycle event. I can tell you through COVID, I've taken my son all over the state motorcycle events. It's healthy, clean, happy, family fun. It brings in a lot of revenue for the different areas that host these events. And it's very, very healthy. Sorry, I had someone was trying to call waiting on me. And I want to remind you, there's a couple of cell phone towers within Humboldt County that are actually in timber production zones in potentially sensitive habitats with northern spotted owl, that you allow them to have backup generators and generators they use often at 75 decibels at the property line. So if you have that in place, how could you force anyone for clean family fun to have less decibels? This isn't like a cannabis operation that's going 24/7, 365. This is a couple events. Like, let's find some common ground. And I encourage you to step out and give them 8 events so they can run a series. I think it's very, very, very important for our community and for our economy to take these other avenues to get clean family fun within our county. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Thomas. Next caller has last 4 digits of 1426. 1426. If you press *6, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, this is Jennifer Raymond, and I just wanted to say that many speakers have discussed the need for additional events to be able to maintain the fair. As a friend of Ferndale, I support the need for other sources of revenue. As Mr. Titus stated, we have never objected to the fig twig market, various runs and bicycle races that have occurred that bring revenues to the fair. And we would welcome the opportunity to meet with the Fair Board and brainstorm other money-making ideas. That being said, I've joined with the members of the Ferndale community to appeal the Humboldt County planning Commission's decision to approve a conditional use permit and mitigated negative declaration for motorized sporting events and concerts at the fairgrounds. Documents submitted by the applicant, the Humboldt County Fair Association, indicate that the project will have significant impacts on the environment in a number of areas. These documents further indicate that the proposed mitigation measures do not significantly mitigate expected environmental effects caused by the project, making a mitigated negative declaration inappropriate. The Planning Commission's decision to approve the use permit and mitigated negative declaration fails to comply with California law. The California Environmental Quality Act states that if there is substantial evidence that a project may have a significant effect on the environment, an environmental impact report must be prepared. A review of the applicant's documents makes it clear that an EIR is required for approval of this project. Any consideration of the project without a completed EIR represents a serious failure to comply with the laws of California. I am asking the Board of Supervisors to overrule the decision of the Planning Commission and require that an EIR be prepared as a condition for approval of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. The next caller has the last four of 7423. Please press *6 and you can speak. Welcome.
Good morning. This is Jack Rice.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Oh, thank you.
Yes, we can, Jack.
So thank you for the opportunity. I'm a resident near Fortuna. I just speaking in support of the conditional use permit and encourage the board to adopt it. It's been characterized very well why this is a good idea for the fair and for the community. Just a couple of things I wanted to reiterate and highlight. First, this does provide economic benefits, and that's great and essential. But also, it was mentioned earlier that it brings enjoyment to the community. And sure, it's not something everybody's going to love, but to a significant portion of the community, these things bring enjoyment. And that's just part of the diversity of our area. And of course, with diversity comes the differences of opinion. Hopefully, as was I understand a planning commissioner mentioned, hopefully with that diversity of opinion comes tolerance. And that doesn't seem to be commonly held or held by everyone, I guess, but it's a good thing to focus on. When you look at how carefully the fair and the county looked at this project and tried to account for those concerns, they did a really good job. And you realize that 99% of the hours in a year, nothing changes, but there's a few when a portion of the community are really going to be enjoying it. And yeah, it'll come with noise. But the fact is that that noise in a way is just a reflection of the diversity that community has. And you're asking some people to tolerate something that's less than their ideal, but it's for the better of the entire community. And I think those themes of tolerance and the idea of just how diverse it is and the enjoyment that it adds are really important to bear in mind. And there are also a few hundred pages of analysis and data that supports the decision. It's not like anybody pulled it out of thin air. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, let's see. Do we have any more? Yes, we have. The next is 2636. If your last four digits are 2636, you can press *6 and join the conversation. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Zimmer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Humboldt County Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau submitted a support letter for the conditional use permit to the Planning Commission on October 19th, and where we detailed all the positive aspects of this project. I need to disclose that as of November 1st, the Farm Bureau is providing administrative services to the fair, and we're working together on many projects. This conditional use permit will allow the fair to continue to provide a diverse array of activities during the entire year, which is so important for the long-term financial stability of the Fair Association. We believe the sporting events, cultural activities, concerts, and community celebrations are vital for our rural county. please deny the appeal and allow the Fair Association to offer the facility to be enjoyed by our entire diverse community. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks.
Let's see, we have another caller here with the last four digits of 6172. If you can press *6, you'll be welcomed in. Welcome.
Cindy Olson, member of the Humboldt County Fair Board. I want to thank the public for their overwhelming positive support of the Humboldt County Fair's CEQA permit. It took us over 2 years to complete this report and much needed dollars. We want to be able to offer professional entertainment to our small community of Humboldt in the form of concerts and motorized events and even musical events. These events will allow the local merchants to make much needed money along with the hotels and restaurants and give them the public the professional entertainment they deserve. We are a family of 77 fairs in California, and through interim events such as these, we are able to add to our bottom line, especially when we were not able to have a fair this year due to COVID. I am fully in favor of this permit. We have worked so hard to meet our requirements and spent money that we really didn't have in order to give the community some special events and provide us with some additional income. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Let's see, the next caller is the last four of 3977. If you press *6 and join us, welcome.
Hi, good morning, board. My name is Michelle Bushnell, and I'm a business owner in Southern Humboldt and a lifelong resident of Humboldt County. I would urge this board to approve this permit. The fairgrounds has been a staple in Ferndale for 98 years. Hopefully somebody residing in Ferndale would realize that they're going to have to tolerate a little bit of noise. The fair has been a staple in my family, as many families, for the last 40 years. We have a very limited amount of events that happen in Humboldt County, and the fairgrounds is an ideal spot for any kind of events to continue forward. I don't think that 17 days out of a year for the fair to be able to utilize their grounds with some noise is an overreach by any means. I would urge that this board approve this and think about the entirety of Humboldt County residents that enjoy the fairgrounds and look forward to events happening in Humboldt County. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Michelle. Let me see, oh yes, we do. We have another caller, 5382. If you press *6. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, this is Dennis Delbiagio. I live in the Ferndale community. I do own property next to the fairground. In fact, we're doing a subdivision there and we've got a couple lots that have moved forward, so that's not really an issue on that. I do want to ask the board to approve this. We're lucky to have the Humboldt County Fair, and meaning the Humboldt County Fair in Ferndale. We benefited from it. And it is always good to see a lot of activity down there. And I think this would be good for our community, for our county, and just benefit us in all ways. So thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, let's see. I don't see any more hands raised. Let's see, if you are waiting to speak, you should press *9 and you'll be in the queue. And then when you're called on, I will tell you to press *6. Okay, I believe that's it for public comment. Do you see anyone there, Ryan?
Chair Fennell, that would conclude public comment. I don't see any other hands raised.
Thank you very much. Bring it back to the board. And that concludes public comment on this item. We've heard from the appellant, we've heard from the applicant, And now we'll go to board discussion. Supervisor Wilson, you had your hand up. But actually, wait a second, if you wouldn't mind. Director Ford, did staff want to say anything before we go on with our discussion, or do you just want to wait for back and forth?
No, I think it would be appropriate for us to respond to a couple of things if you will allow us to.
Yes, please.
The first thing just like to talk about is that it was brought up that EIR is required because there's a fair argument of a significant impact. And a fair argument of a significant impact is normally in the context where there is something that has been brought up that has not been analyzed. In this particular case, the issue of noise has been analyzed. As required by the general plan, there has been a noise study prepared. As stated in the general plan, the thresholds of significance have been evaluated based upon what's in the general plan. And Mr. Lazar pointed out that there were two things there that are very important. One is the noise allowances for short-term events, and the other one is for shorter-term events to have exceedances. And so we are really complying with CEQA by doing two things. We are identifying that the fact of the matter is that concerts will produce noise and motorcycle events will produce noise that generally are in excess of what would normally be allowable in the context of a residential setting. There is mitigation being proposed or actually required as part of both the motorcycle races and for the concerts. With respect to the motorcycle races, while some people are concerned about the 63 decibel requirement because that's not imposed in other areas, that absolutely is in compliance with the general plan. With respect to the concerts, there is the requirement to install the hay bales to greatly reduce the amount of noise by 21 decibels, it's identified. And those are also far shorter term events. Those are not all day events. Those are events that last a couple hours and they're done. That is very tantamount to a chainsaw, somebody operating a chainsaw or doing something like that that lasts for a short period of time. So when the argument is made that there is an impact here that has not been mitigated, it's not supported by evidence on the record, we would disagree with that. We do have the technical basis in terms of the noise analysis. We do have mitigation that is proposed that demonstrably reduces the impacts. We have identified that these are short-term effects. Then the other thing that was brought up is the fact that there is no follow-up requirements, no testing required. And that also is not true if the board were to look in the conditions of approval. There is a requirement that there be noise monitoring done during the events and that information be provided to the county, and that there is adaptive requirements that if there is exceedances, then as the project goes forward, that has to be addressed. So in terms of there not being testing, that's not true. So we believe that we have met the requirement for disclosure of what the impacts are, mitigating it to a less than significant level. And thus we have complied with CEQA. That does not require that an EIR be prepared. I just want to reiterate, and I may have heard one or two of the speakers incorrectly, but this is really talking about 7 events on 7 days. This is just a very small segment of the non-fair year. And so these are very, very limited events. You have heard additional testimony, particularly the lumberjack competition, about some of the other events that occur there. So with respect to baseline and noise that is produced at the fair, Events that produce a high volume of noise are not uncommon there. So we believe that we have adequately captured this in the environmental document, disclosed it, mitigated for it, and do believe that the mitigated negative declaration is appropriate. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Ford. And I would now go to the board. Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Yeah, I just have some questions I want to ask. In terms of concerts, and that, what's the, even though I know there's a limited number of days, is there a duration during a single day? And can you delineate that?
I do not believe that we set a limit on the duration of the concert during the day.
And the reason I ask this is there any space between days that any of these events could occur, or anything like that? So the potential for a 3-day music festival is possible under this scenario?
It's possible, yes.
Okay. I mean, I just want to so when we describe what we have here as in terms of potentials, I'm not against music festivals per se, but I'm not clear that we're, that the project's being described in that potential format, and that a 3-day music festival, for instance, could be somewhat more jarring than 3 days of 3-hour concerts as you had, kind of described it. And so I just want to put that out there, and we may want to adjust this just to make sure there's some sidebars, if that's what the board is interested in. So the other question I have is in the analysis of the existing noise parameters now, where I saw the peaks in there, but were there durations to those peaks at all? Was there a typical duration that qualified for a peak to be measured?
I am not the one who did the modeling on that. I would really refer at this point to Whitchurch to comment on what it picks up. I mean, I know sometimes what it does, but since I didn't set up the model, I would probably not be precise enough.
Okay, because I mean, I'm asking this question because again, it's the level of significance that we're measuring against is existing versus the change, right? And I see the peak, but it's like if the peak is just like a car door slamming near the device that's recording, that's not the same thing as consistent noise that we're trying to compare against. And so I just want to make sure that those things were
can I
impacts.
Let me ask Nick, would you be willing to address that right now?
Yeah, thanks for chiming in. I'd be happy to address that. We took measurements on a second-to-second basis at the sampling locations. And while the peak could be a second, it could be a door, like you said, that's not really what we're measuring against. The peaks are not really important, which is why we calculated CNEL, which is that equivalent full, taking in all the data that we took and estimating this is actually like a kind of a long-term over the entire day or during the period of the events. That's the kind of noise level that we're actually interested in, because that's what really matters for setting a bar and setting restrictions, is that when you take into account, the adjustments for okay, so if that car door slammed at night, technically it's actually will be perceived as louder. So that's what the CNAL does, is that it takes in all the data, including those just very small peaks that really would be hard to be like, yes, this is standard, this is normal. If we decided that the peak was the ambient, then yes, everything would be blown out, everything would be way too high, and it would definitely make it a lot easier to move forward. But that's of course not the idea. We need to make sure that we're giving a conservative and safe estimate that will accurately represent the entire day and the event.
I appreciate that. And then another question for John is and I don't want a lot of explanation, but I mean, just so it's on, in the record with regards to the greenhouse gas emissions question from the appellant. I just want to know what your analysis, just the briefest summation of the analysis on that.
Basically, the shortest answer is the very limited nature of the duration of the project. It's not going to be attracting from a huge area. It's not going to be attracting a huge amount of traffic. While some of the events will include motorcycles, which exhibit exhaust 2 days out of the year, very minor.
And then on the potential mitigations for noise or for volume, I guess, related to the racing, was the option, I mean, you guys looked at technology of mufflers as your kind of main option. Was the technology of electric motor racing, was that considered in part of this?
Not as a mitigation measure, but it's probably something that will be the wave of the future.
I mean, I noticed that flat track racing in February of this year, there were electric motor bike racing happening on the West Coast for flat track racing. And it was mentioned that it was, I could read a sentence out of the article, but although it doesn't have the noise, it was quite exciting, and people were really into it and really liked it a lot. And so I was kind of wondering, I mean, that seems like that technology is just now happening, and we're analyzing this in the current context, and into the future. So knowing that, is there a way that we might be able to encourage the adaptation of those events to be electric motor races, or at least partial electric motor races, in order to help mitigate for that? And there's a couple. One. I mean, that's the mitigation part of that, and I would say that I think would be an interesting potential venue for that. But also just in understanding that these types of requirements drive technology quite often. And I would put it out there that Humboldt County is on the map in terms of electrical vehicles, at least in terms of electric bikes. 25% of the electric bikes sold in the United States right now are through Rad Power bikes, which is Humboldt County invention, more or less. I'm going to say South Fork graduate, Humboldt State graduate is the inventor and CEO of that. And it was through that necessitation that got to that place. And I'm just kind of wondering would it be possible for us to put into a permit the request, or not even request, the requirement of a minimum of 1 heat of electric vehicles per day of race, with a transition to potentially by maybe like 2030, in 10 years, that 50% of these races be electric. I'm just wondering if that's possible. And then even on the other side of that, could we have a trigger or something in here after some analysis of what we see? Could we add all electric races, because we know that they're going to be less impactful from a noise perspective, so that days could be added for races that are all electric? And I was just kind of wondering, like, in that spectrum of, helping Humboldt County be on the forefront of something, helping also to mitigate for these noise impacts, which I'm going to say, I understand the relationship, or the discussion related to what was referred to as the gentrification of Ferndale, but other communities are having demographic shifts too, and we're going to see more and more requests like this. And so I think it would be good if Humboldt County could be on the forefront of that, and if there's a way that we can encourage that transition, both from an impact perspective, but also just from being ahead of the curve. I'm just kind of wondering if there's a way we could condition this project to make that not painful, but in actually probably something that could be beneficial in the future.
So, in just thinking about it, I would suggest that if you were inclined to impose a condition, that it would start off with a requirement just to include an electric class, just as a way of identifying that, we are interested in seeing electronic motorcycles participate, and maybe then put in a provision that within a certain number of years that there be a requirement to have entrance within that class, and then maybe sequentially get to a place where in 2030, as you mentioned, that 50% of all the races be with electric motorcycles.
And on the other side of that, could we add at the very least, a provision that if any of that is working and working well, that we could add days that were electric only? Because again, I suspect that, you're not going to have the same level of noise from those events. So you're actually adding events rather than taking away events. And I'm just wondering if our CEQA analysis would allow for that. Because on one hand, I'm talking about is reducing impact. On the other hand, adding an event without any analysis might be something that you might want to think about differently. I don't want to have to go through a whole new CEQA analysis necessarily to add one event like that if you don't think it's going to be.
The CEQA analysis evaluated up to 4 motorcycle races. So we're clear from a CEQA perspective to go up to 4 days. So we could add two days of electrical motorcycle events and be consistent with the CEQA document.
And then before I kind of move on, let other people, I want to say the fair is pretty important to me. It's important to my family, and the traditions around that we've been going. I even grabbed my daughter, she's 13 now, but I think she was 5 when she made her Nova's Fair Fund jar, right? It still exists, still gets the, in order to get her wristband and to, do all the stuff. I'm just saying, it's this is something that we really look forward to and we want to be supportive of. But I also don't want to reject the idea that, that there are community members that the fair has to live within and around. I think that's important to understand, or the fairgrounds, and we as the owners of the property are a part of that. And then I also want to make sure that our CEQA is robust, as especially in this case, we don't have a third party that is signing a waiver. It's us, right? And so I want to make sure that we're stretching as far as we can to address mitigations and so that we keep ourselves out of that hot water. So that's all I have for now. I appreciate the patience of the board for listening to me on this.
Any other members of the board would like to discuss this? I'd just like to reflect on that concept of the electric motorcycles. I don't see, listen to the rest, but I don't see it as something we're going to add in as another condition. I think that the fair board might like the idea that they could expand to more events if they were to be all electric, and that would be an incentive in that direction to be cutting edge, etc. But I think they've already cut down on the number of motorcycle events as part of the mitigation, so I'm not sure that would go over very well. But Supervisor Bass, Supervisor Bohn, and Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, it's interesting that the electric motorcycle concept definitely is interesting. I'm not sure if I'd be comfortable with conditioning right now, moving forward, that, I'm not exactly sure. I know Director Ford mentioned some language, and I know Supervisor Wilson put out some ideas. But I like the idea of saying perhaps they could add 2 more days if they were electrical. And I'm thinking, and if, unfortunately, if we could have answered some questions, and this might be something they're looking at already. We don't know. But I think that's interesting, an interesting concept. And I guess, also, it's hard. I think one of the speakers mentioned Commissioner McAvoy's comment. And I think she hit it on the nose. There's no easy solutions. There's nothing where everyone's going to be happy. But I tell you, when I see a 7-0 vote by our planning commission, who is made up of extremely different individuals that normally I would not see I would not have expected a 7-0 out of there. So I have to believe that they really thought very thoroughly about it and they feel really strongly about it as well. So, at this point, I'm actually agreeing with what came from our planning commission, unless something else comes up. I think they did their due diligence, and I think we're trying to fine tune it perhaps.
Supervisor Bohn.
I think the idea, if they want to have electric motorcycles, I think they can, if there's enough interest, as in anything, can we condition it that they're supplied by wind power? But as we move this forward, I've watched it a couple times, the planning commission meeting that night, and I follow, and then I spent some time with the chair of the planning commission, who's been on there for 8 years. And I asked him, have you ever seen such a powerful 7-0 vote? Because all planning commissioners spoke in favor of it, and they all reiterate that it is the Humboldt County Fair. I get a lot of it falls back on me. I go to a lot of the events there and have been, as everybody knows, for close to 59 years. But I think as we move forward, I keep hearing, so we're celebrating the 50th year of CEQA. And I think Bob Brown, who's one of the managing partners of SHN, said it best. CEQA is a great tool for making a good project better, but it's also a tool that works very well if everybody plays fair. We throw CEQA out there like it's a potato chip. And there's been a lot of work done on this and a lot of effort. And some of the board members, and I've spent quite a bit of time in Ferndale, and there are people opposed to this. There certainly is. I had some conversations, but it absolutely amazed me, because we've had a few appeals for a few weeks. I noticed, I went through the planning commission letters, and almost half of them that were opposed just asked them to dial it back. So what did they do? They dialed it back. Then I looked at Arlington Avenue, which is right across the street, and I think 9 of the 12 houses in Arlington wrote letters in support. Quite a few of the people, a lot of the business people on Main Street gave it great support. And I think one of the callers, they don't say anything, like the kinetic race, which is great, but it closes down Main Street. It flows the whole flow of town. But they realize that's the quaintness of Ferndale. I truly believe this is being, I think somebody mentioned it, this is being driven by another faction. And I don't think that needs to be got into here. But the fair is talking now, and the other thing I can tell you, and I speak from a little bit, 35 years ago. No, it wasn't 35 years ago, but I was fair board president for 8 years at the 9th District Ag, Redwood Acres, appointed by 3 different governors of the state of California. I was on it for 11 years, president for 8 years. We're not going to have 5 concerts. Gary Gunderson, bless his soul, who's no longer with us, they don't make a lot of money because we don't have stages. We don't have sound equipment. We don't have lights. We don't have all the things to have like San Francisco, Portland has. Every once in a while, we can hijack a tour bus that's coming from Portland to San Francisco. They'll come over here and do a small little concert or a little bigger concert. Willie loves Humboldt County for some strange reason, so he comes here a lot, him and Snoop Dogg. But anyway, we're not going to get 5 concerts here. You're going to get a couple motorcycle races because they like coming here. And it was a boom to Ferndale. Every hotel room was full. But all the other events, and then you heard from a lot of the volunteer board members, and they've been busting their tail. Now, everybody wants to throw, the fairs, a lot of fairs. I've probably been to CDFA 3 times on fair issues, not just our fair, Redwood Acres. MODOKs. There's a lot of fairs having a lot of financial troubles because the governors, the state has pulled a lot of the money. So they have to do these ulterior events, but they do a lot of other events. I mean, like the Fig Twig Market, a lot of different events. I just spent 20 days there straight during the fires doing disaster relief. The fair didn't know if they were going to get paid. Johanna, Andy Titus, Tim Renner came by and helped. The volunteer fair board members, they didn't know if the fair was going to get paid, but they opened the showers, the bathrooms. And there was at one time 70 evacuees, a number of them from Trinity County out there, and they opened their arms. They've been there for the 64 flood. They've been there for everything else. So the fair has been there a long time. And I think the majority of the people want to see what it's going to do. The conditions have been met. We've run the sound studies. I mean, a race lasts approximately 8 minutes. And then there's about a 20-minute gap before the next race. So it's not like it's going to be pounding on your head forever. It's 2 days. We're never going to see 5 concerts. If we see 5 concerts, I'll be the most amazed person in the world. The community can't afford it, and they can't afford to come here for 5 concerts. We've seen that because, I mean, there are other avenues come into play here. That the fair is, they were asked to cut back, they cut everything in half. They've done their sound studies, they've done everything. And the overall support, and not just Ferndale, I have to reiterate, you guys, it's the Humboldt County Fair. It's not the Ferndale Fair, it's the Humboldt County Fair in Ferndale. So we all have to look to see what our people in our districts enjoy. And I mean, I've got overwhelmingly support. And again, I have never seen, like I said, Alan Bongio has never seen a 7-0 vote with as much support and dig down dialogue that took place. And Melanie McCarver and Alan Bongio, Melanie McCarver actually owns the closest residence to the racetrack there is. And then Alan's not too far, he's in the same valley. So they have 17 nights of racing. And that was mitigated down from 11 o'clock at night, they had to stop. Now they're mitigated down to 10 o'clock at night. There's mitigation measures for time levels and stuff in there. And I think, I would move staff's recommendation right now, if I could, and I will. I'll take staff's recommendation, accept staff's recommendation.
I'll second it if I can.
Absolutely.
and so,
okay, we have a motion and a second.
I still want to.
Supervisor Wilson. Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask a question of Director Ford in relationship to the enforcement with the noise part of this. And so what happens? Like, what happens when things are too loud? What's the remedy for that? And especially when I'm going back to the motorcycle racing part of this thing, because it lasts, it's a day long. Does someone report back? Do they then have to like cull from the riders? How many riders are there? Because it is an extrapolation in the analysis. It's just an extrapolation of 3 motorcycles running around a track, and then without a crowd and all the other noise that comes with it. What happened? How does that happen?
So they are required to have a noise monitor on site. That noise does get reported back to the department. If we find that they have violated that, then our first step will be to work with them for the next event to make sure that exceedances don't happen. If we're unable to keep them within the realm of the approved permit, then the enforcement action is revocation of the permit, which would be back here in front of the Board of Supervisors.
So when they have an event that's 2 days, and those 2 days are consecutive, and they're Saturday and Sunday, they could run through both those events before it ever gets reported back to the staff with relationship to any kind of violation of the permit.
It could be. I would anticipate that if they were horribly out of compliance, that the sheriff's office would get a call, and our code enforcement would probably get a call. and we would be able to go out to the site and look and see whether or not the monitoring is being done and what the results of the monitoring show. And if the monitoring were not showing that it's, then we would have the ability to require them to do what is necessary to bring it into compliance.
Okay. So in real time, I would imagine, or at least the next day. And again, it seems like from the mitigations, after you've applied the technology, the only thing you can do is lessen the amount of riders. Is that what you see as the potential? Okay.
Correct.
So on the potential for a concert that's 3 days in a row that's not been analyzed for this particular thing, is it possible to condition this that any concert event that's more than one, that doesn't have more than 1 day in span between two concert events or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like in terms of like that they're not day after day, that be somehow be approved by the, brought back to staff for review as like a special event or something. I just want to make sure that we, because again, it's just hasn't been described that way, but it allows for a 3-day, full day, festival. And that's not how, I have not heard that in the discussion or in the project description, but technically it's definitely, it appears to be allowable under what's written here. And I would hope that we have at least some review. If someone wants to, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a music festival there. It just seems like on a case by case basis, it would be great if there was, a special event permit that was required for that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm going to give you one data point and then make a suggestion.
Sure.
The data point is that the hours for the concerts are between noon and 10.
Okay.
And then if you want to allow sequential events subject to a special permit, we could just say that events lasting more than 1 day, for music events lasting more than 1 day are required to obtain approval of a special permit at least 60 days prior to the event.
I just think that would be reasonable considering that festivals, because again, festivals are like, even if the music gets done at 10, it's a festival. People are just there waiting for the next day to come around. It's a totally different vibe. It's like not the same thing as everyone just kind of goes home and they're done. And so I would ask the motion maker if it's okay if we ask for a special condition, if there's a special permit, if there are two or more consecutive days of music as part of this. Would that be reasonable?
Well, yeah, before I add, are the electric, I'll
get to that
do you
one
want anything in there for the electric motorcycles? Because it's a great thing to follow up, but I don't know if you've looked at the cost of these. I don't know if you've ridden one, but I've ridden one and I've looked at the cost of them, and I do believe they are racing them, but I don't think it's going to be a wave of the future. So to demand people to have one in 5 years, electric motorcycle race, they'd have to pay people. People don't like to come to the coast. I'm just going to tell you, just to race, to do almost anything, because there's so much they can do on the I-5 corridor. Why would you drive over here for our limited motel spaces and stuff like that? Like soccer tournaments and stuff. So are the electric motorcycles off the table?
Well, let me just put it out there as they
will happen if they want to happen.
Kind of. I mean, that technology is not actually like that, to be quite honest. I mean, most technology is regular.
I don't carry a bag phone anymore.
But let me just offer a suggestion that I think will be both offer a carrot, like a movement in the right direction, and that a class, that they basically add a class that's required. Now that the requirement is the class is added, but that if they want to add another day of all electric races, that they'll at least to have had some data from a race before on site, right? And so it is an encouragement to bring in that technology and that in that movement in that direction, and that there's something that's positive on the other side. So it's not just a negative that they, you know, and quite frankly, sure, we could ask them to add a class. That there's a race that happens. When that happens, it's, you know, the 1 8-minute run that's electric. And it, frankly, if they can only find one bike, or if they, whatever it is, you know, they can get it done and do it, meet the requirement. I'm not gonna, or they can mock it, you know, in some way, I suppose. But in the end, if they want to really move into having an extra day, because what in the article that I read from the event earlier this year, they had their they had just exactly that. They had a day with internal combustion engines, regular bikes. They had one run that was basically I guess you'd say sort of a demonstration, and then the next day they had the World Championship of electric flat track bikes, you know, and so they made a 2-day event out of it. It worked really well for them, and I would like us to see us help move in that direction. And so with some encouragement, if they just add the class, that opens the door for the ability to have in the data, if we can get some data from that, it shows that it's, you know, doesn't have a lot of noise associated with it, what I wouldn't expect. And hey, you get an extra day of racing in with an all electric racing.
And you're okay with the extra people?
Yeah, I don't think it's the people is not the issue. I mean,
well,
I don't really,
okay.
Okay,
yeah.
so as somebody who is also going to vote on this, I like the motion that was on the floor. Okay, now if you want to add some things between you regarding incentives for people to have electric, and they can go forward if they can do it. As far as putting limitations on the concert, I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that there are certain additional benefits. Sometimes if you have a 2-day concert than if you have a one, you might have more people in hospital, in hotels, etc. And I just think that there's no real reason to put that limitation, since it wasn't contemplated. Honestly, we're going a little far afield right now. I think there's been a lot of work done on finding a happy medium with the 5 concerts, 2 motorcycle races. And I don't know. I just think that we're going a little far afield. And I do like the idea of the incentive to have additional motorcycle races if they're electric, but that's how I'm feeling. Supervisor Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I would first, through the chair, ask Supervisor Wilson. I was trying to figure out, I almost thought you said, you know, anything that's going to last more than 2 days needed a special event if it was musical. Was that your intent? And so it's not just a 2-day event. It would be if you go to the 3rd day.
Or 5.
Is that correct?
Right? I mean,
okay.
Whatever's,
but that's where,
anything more than 2, anything, well, no, excuse me. I didn't mean that. I actually mean anything more than 1 day. And I apologize for that. And as Estelle mentioned, it hasn't been sold as any multi-day events. It's not discussed in the document. It's not discussed in CEQA. I'm just saying, like, it would be probably, I think we would be safe to ask for a special event permit for anything more than 1 day of a concert. I just put it out there. Like,
thank you. That's all I need. Clarification that unfortunately I kind of liked your other one that you said, but you said wasn't quite what you meant, which is fine. I guess I do have a question for Director Ford. When we're talking a special permit, what type of process is that? Is it ministerial? What exactly would be required of if that were to be the direction?
So a special permit is a discretionary permit that we send out a notice to all the residents within 300 feet, indicating that unless we hear of concerns, we're intending to approve this special permit. It's called a notice of intent to approve. What that really does is allows the neighborhood to hear about what's going to be happening and to respond if they have concerns. If and when those circumstances arise that we get neighborhood concerns, we then elevate that to a public hearing at the Planning Commission.
Okay, yeah, I was more like, if it was 2 days, to me 3 sounded like it would deserve it. I'm not sure if I go with just the 2-day one. And then my other question, maybe it wasn't a question, but I still like the idea of adding an incentive. I mean, if we add a class for the electric, it doesn't mean that if they have no one to race, they have no one to race, right? You know, so it seems like that's a pretty, you know, I think that would be fairly minor, especially if we can throw in the option of potentially adding a day or 2 of races that would be fully electric, I guess. I'm trying to go, how do we get the more event days and still keep within, you know, something that works? And again, it's hard when we can't, you know, I see people from the board on the line here. It'd be kind of nice to say, so how does this sound for you guys? But I guess we really can't do that at this point. But, you know, here we do kind of make, you know, we make decisions and don't always necessarily know how it impacts who we're telling to do, you know, do something one of those days. Anyway, I like the direction this is going. I really want to see this move forward. You know, I think we're just trying to work out a few minor issues and all. And I know we still haven't heard from Supervisor Madrone, Madam Chair.
Supervisor hasn't put his hand up yet, but I'm sure he will. Supervisor Bohn has put his hand up though, so Supervisor Bohn.
Yeah, I think the motorcycle racers, the way they make money when they put on an event, they make money by people paying to race. So if 6 electric motorcycles want to come over here and race from Sacramento or the Bay Area, or, you know, maybe there'll be a couple here by then, I think you're going to see them add the class. I think it's supply and demand. I think they will let them race. To say they have to put it on there, I don't know if there's an extra set of insurance because of the larger batteries. I don't know if there's anything that has to do with that. So I think, I don't know. So I'm just saying, and I don't know if the electrical system out at the fairgrounds can absorb that much charging of that many bikes if they all come. So they have to be charged. They're just like a little mini Tesla. They're not, you don't put D batteries in them. So I'm trying to think as we move forward. I don't want to put the restrictions. I think they would accept electric motorcycles in a heartbeat if 50 of them wanted to come over here. There's not a doubt in my mind. Now, as far as concerts, they've cut it in half. They've gone 5 days. So if they want to do no more than 2, I was with Virginia on that. If they want to do a 2-day thing, I mean, they only get 5 of them. So you take the Band-Aid off slowly, you take the Band-Aid off fast, either way you want to do it. But they're only getting 5 days. They're not getting 5 events. They're getting 5 days. So if they take 2 2-day events, they've only got 1 left to go back on. I'm trying to think, when was the last time I saw a 2-day festival here, except maybe the fiddle contest in Blue Lake and a couple of the, you know, but they don't, you know. So I think I'm okay with just going forward, and they can revamp from there of 2 motorcycle events, and if they want to throw in electric events where they can add a 3rd day if it's all electric, I would make that change. As far as limiting everything else, I mean, I will limit it to no more than 2-day events. I'll compromise.
So how about that seconder of the motion?
So far, I'm amenable. I would like to hear what Supervisor Madrone thinks of all this.
Okay. Supervisor Madrone, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready to read the proclamation. So, whereas youth activities are so important in our community, and whereas there is a 10 p.m. Closeout, you know, that seems to be a reasonable time. I very strongly support creating as many youth activities and community activities as we can for many, many reasons. I see that the fair does need to provide some financial support. And I do recognize that these things can be a bit intrusive for neighbors and things like that. But I think when you buy property around a fairground, there has to be some expectation that there's going to be noise and events and traffic and parking and all kinds of things happening. I mean, that's the nature of a fairground. I really like the idea of having electric races. It doesn't sound like there's a barrier to that with what we're doing here today. If we do pass this motion, I really appreciate Supervisor Wilson for always trying to keep us thinking about innovation and changes that are happening already right now, let alone what's the future going to look like. So I think that's a really great discussion. And you know, like Supervisor Bohn said, I think that the board, you know, if there's a demand for that, then the board will respond appropriately, you know, the board of the fair. I do think there's going to be more demand for these things on the coast. You know, if you're in motorcycle racing and it's 110 degrees, holy Lord, you know, let's have a really hot race in a cool area, right? Rather than a hot race in a hot area. I actually think on every level, we're going to see an increasing demand of people from the valley wanting to come and live here, come and recreate here, come and have events here, all that kind of stuff. So I think we saw a lot of that already this summer. Certainly some of it was COVID related, but a lot of it has been a trend going on for a long time with the heat, the smoke, the congestion and everything else everywhere else that we simply don't have to deal with on the coast. Thank goodness. So yeah, I do think that, you know, this is a good motion. Right. Yeah. Well, at any rate, whereas I do support all these things, therefore I support the motion as it's generally crafted. So, and I appreciate the work of the board to have already dialed it down quite a bit to try and meet neighborhood concerns. I think it was stated that it's been cut in half and things like that. That seems to be a trend that we're experiencing here at the board with all kinds of issues coming before us, whether it's cannabis or races or concerts. We're cutting things in half, you know, so that's kind of been the mode lately is take whatever comes before us and try to minimize it. And I appreciate that effort on the fair board's part. So
you just exposed,
anyway,
their playbook. They're going to start asking for twice as much now.
Actually, that's already happening, as we know, in cannabis. The many consultants and applicants know, let's just go for double what we want so we get half. That's certainly not how I think about it when I look at these things. But anyway, I support the motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Madrone. Yeah, I really want to weigh in on this. I think that for all of the reasons that were brought up by the many neighbors and landowners in the area, members of the board, I mean, this is really a good project. And I just want to appreciate the hard work that's gone into meeting the concerns of the community at the same time as you know, meeting the bottom line, but not just the bottom line. There's been mentions of good, healthy exercise for kids going out there, having some fun. I just think there's so much good about this, and I really appreciate, again, as I would say, staff, the board members, everybody trying to come to a good solution. And also the work of the Planning Commission, you know, saw the results of that. And so anyway, just want to put those words in there. Have we nailed down our motion? I felt to me like there was something I could agree with. I want to hear for sure.
Through the chair, I just want to ask Director Ford if he could just clarify the amendments so that we are all together on that one amendment.
Thank you. And Supervisor Bohn also, you want to say something?
There was one amendment related
Let's hear from you.
No more than 2 days of, and then the electric bike thing.
Okay.
So as I understood it, there would be an additional, basically condition, it's actually an allowance, but an additional day of racing can be allowed if all the racing on that day is by electrical motorcycles. But in no case shall the total of motorcycle racing exceed 4 days per year. And the reason that it's worded like that is that they have different events with, say, one day with the traditional motorcycles, and then add a day of electrical racing to that. That's a total of 4 days. That's consistent with the initial study. Okay.
Okay. So
and then
just one question. So just for clarification, so you're saying it's tied to an event that's already happening as opposed to its own event. And I'm not sure if that's what Supervisor Bohn was saying. I think he was just offering an extra day within the year that's electric wherever they want it, if they want to tie it to an event or not.
They really can't do that because the association is basically based out of the Sacramento Valley. So, I mean, they have to bring equipment over, timing equipment, everything has to be brought over. So if you're going to have one day, you have to have the other the next day. That's what trailering. You can't bring all the equipment, safety technicians and things like that. It makes it a lot more fluid. And if you're really trying to drive the bus on a more electric motorcycle, motorized, you want all the motorized guys to stay and watch the electrics and go, hey, I want to spend $19,000 for one of those too, right?
They're going to be a lot cheaper coming up. Trust me. They're only getting less price. But okay, I can understand what you're saying there, Director Ford. So with that clarification, that sounds fine.
And then I also heard that concerts cannot last longer than 2 consecutive days. And then I would like to propose a modification to the findings. And this would be to change finding number 4, which has to do with the stable project description. And this would be new evidence. And the new evidence would state that the Board of Supervisors recognizes that the mitigated negative declaration analyzed a total of 4 days of motorcycle racing and wants to encourage conversion to electric vehicles and therefore imposed a condition or an allowance that allows use of electronic motorcycles if all the racing on that day for an additional day, provided that, I need to work on the language of that, but provided that the number of events remains consistent with the analysis of the mitigated negative declaration. I just want to make sure that if we're ever questioned about this, that it's clear that the board was understanding what the project description was and was staying consistent with the project description that was analyzed in the mitigated negative declaration.
And I have a question.
Thank you.
Related to the finding through the chair, if I may.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Supervisor Wilson.
So with relationship to addressing the potential for, because I feel like it's not impossible that we could get numbers or readings, noise issues for the motorcycle races. It could be, exceed what we have in the permit. I want to make sure that in there somewhere that as a mitigation technology, conversion to electric is a potential on the list of mitigation technologies. I just want to make sure that that option is available in terms of being able to mitigate if there's an issue. And in that way, in the CEQA analysis, it's like there's just more flexibility and acknowledgement of that as a noise mitigation.
I'd be happy to propose something if that is the will of the board.
I have questions about that too now, because we're talking about individual motorcycles passing a test to meet the requirements of the conditional use permit. I just think they're going to another level. I just don't know, but I do see Supervisor Bohn has his hand up, so just want to make sure we hear from you.
I I guess we can add all this. I don't know what the end result is. I'm just having a hard time under the, I know everybody's favorite word, SQL analysis, but is the analysis, are you talking about, so if an electric motorcycle races and a motorized one races, we're going to average the two sounds? You're saying you're going to mitigate the sound if somebody exceeds. So, but it's okay because we're having electric motorcycles the next day. I'm not an engineer as you are.
Good point.
So I'm just trying to understand what you're trying to say. I mean, you're using all the big words, and I'm looking up I got my SQL definition here, but you're hitting all the buzzwords, but do they all fit in the puzzle?
I think Director Ford could probably address that.
So if I understand it correctly, this would fit into condition number 10, where it talks about adaptive management. And one of the solutions to noise exceedances could be conversion or an increasing conversion to electronic motorcycles.
Yeah.
I think
that's only if they exceed.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be, okay, if it exceeds, they don't meet, wouldn't that be obvious? Are you telling them if somebody exceeds, they have to go to electric? I'm just saying, is it, okay.
That's not what I'm understanding. It's what I'm.
Then why is, I just want to know why we're putting it in there,
Exactly.
or was it just because we want to have something in there?
I actually give my thought too before
Please go ahead, Supervisor Bass.
What I heard Director Ford say was that it could be added to the mitigation measures, but I did not hear him say it will be the requirement at that point in time. So if he could clarify if that's the intent or what he's trying to get to.
If I understood Supervisor Wilson's request correctly, it was to add an encouragement in there to consider electric motorcycles as a means by which to address noise exceedances. And so it's not an absolute requirement. It's just something that if we have to have that discussion, that's written into the condition, it becomes part of the dialogue.
Yeah, it's not a requirement, and quite frankly, not even an encouragement. I just wanted to make sure it's on the list of technologies for adaptation if they need it.
Earlier in the motion, it said we would encourage the use of electric. The word encourage was used for electric. And I'm not saying anything against electric vehicles, but what I'm saying is until 2035, if I want to go buy a new pickup, I'm going to go buy a new diesel pickup if I want. 2036, I'll go buy a GMC electric, whatever. I think if people want to race electrics, are going to. I don't think it's ours. I mean, we're missing the point. We're not taking an empty field and says let's have concerts and motorcycle races. We're taking 125-year-old fairgrounds and having historical events there. And I think it was said, I think Supervisor Madrone, who I always agree with, said if you buy a property next to a fairgrounds, and I grew up next to Redwood Acres and snuck into everything through the little hole in Marcelli's fence. I can tell you it was loud at nights because my dad had to get up early and go to work in the morning. But with that being said, we knew it was there when we bought it. Everybody does. So I'm just saying, I know it's not a condition, it's not in there, but how's that going to be valued later on and be interpreted later on if it's in there? If it doesn't mean anything, why is it in there? I'm hearing it doesn't mean anything, but it seems like it's adding something to a legal validity or something in there that can be pulled out later. And I just get nervous about adding stuff that doesn't need to be in there, but it's just nice to throw it in there. That's all I'm saying.
We can remove that. That's all right. All I was trying to do is add another option. That's all. It's like if you want to confine their options, fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and actually the language of the requirement basically says requiring motorcycle racers utilize special exhaust systems that reduce noise and submit to those noise testing prior to being cleared to compete. They don't meet the requirements, that's it. So it's like, however they meet them, that's it. I think that this is kind of picking away at a little something that really doesn't need to be picked at this point. I think the overall goal of doing well by the climate climate change, dealing with climate change issues, is to encourage. You can have another day if you have it all electric. I think that would make much more significant than one motorcycle. Okie doke. Any further discussion? All righty. So we have a motion on the floor, and I would like Ryan to express for all of us his understanding of what that motion is. Or if you don't want to, Ryan, you can have the director.
If we could have Director Ford clarify,
Okay.
that would be absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Director Ford.
My understanding of the motion is as follows, that the board's adopting the resolution that was provided as an attachment to the staff report, which will adopt the mitigated negative declaration. It will approve the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. It will make the findings to deny the appeal and approve the conditional use permit. It will deny the appeal submitted by Friends of Ferndale, and it will approve the conditional use permit authorizing 5 concerts and 2 motorcycle racing events to be held annually, and with the following changes that, and these would be added basically to the project, or to as conditions. Condition number 1, the new condition would be added: an additional day of racing can be allowed if all the racing on that day is by electrical motorcycles, but in no case shall the total number of motorcycle days of racing exceed 4 days per year. A new condition number 2 would say that concerts cannot last longer than 2 consecutive days. And then there would be a change to the resolution, finding number 4, a new provision C, that would state that the Board of Supervisors recognizes that the mitigated negative declaration analyzed 4 days of motorcycle racing and wants to encourage conversion to electric vehicles, and therefore impose the condition allowing an additional day of racing if all the racing on that day is by electric motorcycles.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Ford. Appreciate
Pretty
that.
sure that's what I said.
All right, Ryan. And Ryan, we're ready for a
Yes,
vote.
thank you. Thank you, Director Ford. Thank you, Chair Fennell. Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
And Supervisor Fennell?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
Thank you to everybody for robust discussion and your support. So the next item before us is actually a closed session. I'll go to Council Billingsley now for a description of that closed session.
Thank you, Chair. It's the intention of the board to meet in closed session for a conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1 to discuss existing litigation in the case of State of California versus Humboldt County Department of Health and Human Services et al., case number CV 180143.
Thank you. And I do want to make a note here for those in attendance, and that is that we do have another closed session listed for today, but it's at a time certain, which is at 3 p.m. So we will go into this closed session, but then we will also come out into public before 3 to announce that one. So again, any public comment on this item?
What?
Seeing none. Supervisor Bohn, do you have a question?
So we're going to go into closed session. Can't we just continue into our closed session at 3 from there and come out at the 3 o'clock one to announce both closed sessions?
No, because the closed session at 3 is a time certain, so there might be somebody tuning in just for that who might want to comment. So we have to have it at 3.
Well, they'll tune in at 3. Okay.
Okay, yeah. All righty. So we're now going to go into closed session. Let me very briefly ask you, Council Billingsley, in terms of reporting out of closed session, how long will this take, do you think? Or is it okay if we report out of this prior to going into the 3 p.m. closed session?
Sure. I would recommend we just report out at 3 o'clock before we go back into the other closed session.
Perfect. Great. All right. See everybody in closed session.
Are we taking 5 or anything, or?
You guys want 5? 5. We'll see you in 5. We're back in session, and I'd like to ask Council report out from item L1.
Chair, there's no reportable action on item L1.
Thank you. And that will bring us to our time set closed session agenda. So if you would fill us in again, please, Council Billingsley.
Yes, Chair. Pursuant to Government Code 549-7.6, it's the intention of the board to meet in closed session to review the county's position and instruct its designated labor negotiators, Kelly Barnes, Alicia Hayes, and Jack Hughes. The organizations are AFSCME Local 1684 and the Humboldt Deputy County Sheriff's non-management unit.
Thank you, Council Billingsley. With that, I'll ask if there is any public comment on this item. And I do see one hand up. That's number 4 last digits of 3053. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Thomas Mulder here. This may come a little harsh, but it's after the election and this still hasn't been finalized. I thought this was supposed to be finalized before the election for an endorsement. That's the rumor on the street. So hopefully now that the election's over, this can be finalized. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Not sure. Okay. Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board. We're going into closed session, and then Council Billingsley, or does anybody have an idea of how long this session will go? Maybe CAO Nelson.
I would estimate approximately 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay. All right, we will try to be back here by about 3:35 or so. Thank you very much. Session on item K1. Council Billingsley, anything to report out?
Chair Fennell, there's no reportable action on that item.
Great. Thank you very much. We are adjourned, and happy Veterans Day. Thank you. Bye, guys.